in a still, silent space, so quiet it was frightening. All the trees around this place had withered, drained of life. Beneath the crimson sky, bats circled overhead. This was also the end of the road, a vague boundary between life and death. It was that dream again with that same man. Whose ashes are these? He stood there absent-mindedly, like a soulless corpse. What was he looking at so sorrowfully? Suddenly he turned around, his face flushed red, a furious tear slowly rolling down from the corner of his eye. She could not hold herself together. A terrible sadness and fear swallowed her whole. A girl with glossy black hair was crying uncontrollably. By reflex, she rubbed her head as she thought, that dream again. It had been a long time since she last saw it. She felt so sorry for that man. With slightly panicked eyes, she asked herself whether her magic was still working properly. Perhaps her skills had dulled. After all, it had been a long time since she had used them. Her friend came in with a bright expression. "Seizen, you're awake." Tilting her head, she called out Bakon. Bakon looked at her and urged, "We need to hurry, so get ready. The housekeeper wants all the servants gathered at the imperial palace." She replied in surprise, "The housekeeper? I haven't seen her in 3 years." The story began more than a decade ago, when my homeland, the southern island, was occupied by the Lagardec Empire. That beautiful palace-like manor carried an indescribably sad story, for it had also been 3 years since Bakon and I were sold as slaves to that empire. It had been a long time since heathen slaves had set foot in this palace. The two girls put on their servant uniforms and walked through the luxurious corridor. It had been a very long time since heathen slaves had entered this palace. It was rather noisy down here, with so much commotion everywhere. Looking at the crowd, Bakon quietly said to Seizen, "Maybe we should stand in the back, since we smell like horse dung." A middle-aged woman with a stern face stepped forward. This was housekeeper Catherine. "It seems both of you are here. The reason I called you all together is that in 3 days, the emperor will return to the palace." No one who heard this news could hide the fear on their face. They could only stand frozen and listen. "Therefore, we need to prepare enough attendants to remain at His Majesty's side, attendants who can serve him most attentively." Everyone immediately began whispering and arguing noisily. "Do we really have to stand beside that murderer? How can we possibly do something like that?" One after another, their voices made the hall erupt. "He'll have to go back to war again anyway, right? I can't do that. It's no different from digging my own grave." Seizen, expressionless, spoke to Bakon. "I was wondering why they summoned both servants and slaves. So it was because of this." Bakon could only give a foolish little laugh at the situation before them. "But the war is over, isn't it?" There was a mysterious man whose face no one could clearly make out, with the red dragon robe draped over him. He was likely someone of high status. To the servants, the emperor had never been someone worthy of respect or trust. His very existence carried fear, and because of that, they always tried to stay far away from him. Emperor Julian. There were no shortage of rumors about him. He was infamous as a war-crazed madman. He had also gone through 2 political marriages, and it was said that every night he killed his own attendants. And what was especially notable was that the Empress had lived only 1 month after their wedding. There were even rumors that the Emperor himself had killed her. While everyone else was trembling in terror, Seizen thought with quiet anticipation, "I want to see who will volunteer for that position." Housekeeper Catherine raised her hand and said softly to the servants, "Serving His Majesty is a great honor, so you will receive 100 kron each week." At once, everyone froze stiff, weighing their lives against 100 kron. Seeing this, she could only grit her teeth and continue, "If by tomorrow no one has volunteered, then I will choose at random. I hope you understand." Bakon scratched her head and gave a light laugh as she reminded Seizen, "You're wasting time. Looks like we won't be getting to bed early tonight. There's still so much work to do." Seizen only gave a vague reply. She was lost in thought over the emperor. "Emperor, why do I keep thinking about the man from my dream?" Bursting her bubble of thought, Bakon softly called out, "Seizen, what's wrong?" Seizen was full of questions. Why are there so many rumors about the emperor? The question left Bakon a little surprised. Seizen raised a hand to her chin and began reasoning it out. Seeing that, Bakon fondly ruffled her hair. Hasn't he been on the battlefield this whole time and never once returned to the palace? Usually, a hero returning from war should be praised. It seems those malicious rumors aren't entirely true, but they still make people afraid. Is he really some lunatic who kills everything? Bakon looked away and muttered, could it be because of the curse he bears? A curse? Who would dare curse the emperor? Then she turned back to Sazin and said, hey, no one ever told you? And so she began telling her a tale from not so long ago. 25 years earlier, there had once been a knight burned alive. Her name was Jalak. The image appeared before their eyes, a radiant woman carrying only her sword onto the battlefield to protect her country. She had led a long war against Krisha and ultimately claimed victory. Because of that, she earned the respect and trust of all the people of the empire. At that time, one man had taken notice of Jalak, a trembling man biting his nails. However, when the war ended, the price she paid for risking her life to defend the nation was unbearably cruel. She was tied to a stake, and many torches were aimed at Jalak. Rumors had spread that she was a witch, and in the end, she was burned alive at the stake. She could do nothing but look at everyone with eyes full of loathing as they shouted abuse. Kill the heathen girl. She deceived everyone with the aid of demons. Standing atop the woodpile, already catching fire, she was met with one cruel cry after another. Burn her! Burn her! Heartbreaking of all, those were the very voices that had once praised her as the empire's heroine, and now they screamed against her. Looking at those two-faced people made one wonder whether the god's grace toward mankind was really as thin and fragile as paper. The entire royal family sat there watching the scene. To you, my existence was nothing more than a fishbone lodged in your throat. She was filled with hatred. Do you know that? You are a tyrant. She stared at the man who stood there blankly watching her about to be consumed by flames. Jalak strained forward and screamed, fighting for her life. The price I paid for being loyal to you was to be burned alive like a witch. My crime was that I spent my life fighting for the Lagardec Empire. The only sin I must pay for is remaining faithful to a knight's oath, as if it were something sacred. But not only was the man's conscience unmoved, he bluntly cried out, she's gone mad. Jalak was furious. What have you ever done as emperor? You abandoned the people and fled when the enemy pointed their swords at us. Also, you could say you had to survive. Humiliated and enraged, that emperor shouted, silence, you mad witch. Kill her at once. The people below seemed brainwashed, instantly joining in. A witch must not speak to the emperor that way. Do not insult the royal family. The flames grew larger and larger, swallowing Jalak's whole body. She could no longer resist. She could only stare wide-eyed and wait for death. Jalak swore to herself, I will curse you as a witch. The Empress at the time could not hide her shock, raising a hand to her mouth. That emperor was delighted. He laughed scornfully and pointed ahead. Look, she admitted it. You all heard her clearly. But then he fell silent when he heard her grief-soaked words of hatred. Your body will rot and decay until white bones show through, and no one will recognize what remains of you. Tears shimmered in Jalak's eyes. Looking at the heavily pregnant Empress before her, she said, I will also leave a gift for the tyrant's child in her womb. She can no longer remain kind. The sins of the father would be paid by the child. The blood running through that child's veins will lead it into a lonely, broken life, like some pitiful creature abandoned in a barren land. Everyone below trembled in fear. No one dared interrupt or curse her anymore. The woman among you who holds unwavering faith will be its mother, and you will all become servants to an evil being. That child will be nothing but a beast imprisoned from birth, cast onto the battlefield as a tool for killing. A hand clenched tight around something in its palm upon hearing those vicious words. I need not see the future to know what will become of you. The stones you throw at me, the flames you use to burn me, and all these ringing screams, none of it will amount to anything compared to what awaits you. Something was hurled at Jalak's head. Die, you witch! Shut that filthy mouth! Jalak's eyes clearly showed her sorrow. In the end, she too was only a fragile woman. I regret living all these years under a false belief. Looking at that star-filled night sky of hope, if I were given another life, I would be free like the wind, unbound, attached to nothing, and I would live for myself alone. That is how it will happen. That was the curse laid upon the empire. Bakon scratched the back of her neck. Just like the witch said, it all came true. That's why no one dares get involved with the royal family anymore. A lot of people still remember that story because it's been passed down from one generation to the next. Hearing that, Sazin lowered her head. Everything Jalak said had become reality. Thinking of Jalak, Sazin knew that in the Empire, mages were treated like heathen witches and executed, all because of that curse. Bakon and Sazin parted ways, and Sazin thought, I'll have to be more careful not to get discovered. I'm going to change. You can wear mine if you want. At the stables, someone was pouring water. Of course, that cursed emperor was terrifying, but it was Sazin working while deep in thought. If I become his attendant and get 100 round each week, then if I save for a year, I can end my life as a slave and return to the southern island. The large barrels were already empty. I'll pay back all the money my parents borrowed. Thinking that, Sazin stroked the horse's head, smiled, and of course, there would be freedom too. She crouched down to rearrange the water buckets. But Butcher Emperor was not just an empty nickname. A slave could buy back her freedom, but she expertly carried them outside. Suddenly, something caught Sazin's attention. It was the smell of blood. She turned toward the dark red, scent drifting in the wind. What is that smell? A servant came running in panic, shouting, "Housekeeper!" Catherine calmly asked, "What is it?" To Catherine's astonishment, the servant reported, "The emperor has already returned to the palace." What? He said he wouldn't arrive for another 3 days. No, where is he now? He arrived at the palace with the knights, and he was even leading his horse himself. A spray of blood splattered everywhere, staining Sazin's clothes. A large man stepped forward and demanded roughly, "Who are you?" Sazin instinctively raised both hands as if surrendering. The man looked rather young. In a cold voice, he said, "You look just like a rat." The sword pressed against her neck, making Sazin break out in cold sweat. Julian kept the same harsh attitude as he spoke to her, his voice icy. "Who are you? You look like some filthy rat." His eyes in the darkness stirred a thought in Sazin's mind. A demon? The frightened look on her face only seemed to confirm Julian's suspicion. Sazin was so tense she did not dare blink, afraid that the moment she did, she would instantly lose her life. The fate of the unlucky horse only strengthened her conviction. He had to be some kind of malevolent spirit. For some reason, he stubbornly kept his sword pointed at Sazin and interrogated her. "I asked who you are." Meanwhile, she tried her best to calmly explain in a gentle voice, "I wasn't spying on anyone. I think you've misunderstood." Julian merely sneered in contempt, not bothering to listen to her explanation. "A misunderstanding, you say?" His words and actions radiated killing intent. "Isn't it obvious enough already?" Sazin turned and ran, not caring whether Julian understood what was happening or not. One thought filled her mind. "I have to save myself. I need to run. I've never seen a demon this strong before." The shadow of fear had completely taken over Sazin's heart. He might slaughter me just like those horses. In her eyes, he had become a demon of the night, capable of hunting her down at any moment. Suddenly she froze, as if she had discovered something. Sazin had not expected there to be a tool here, a rake. She did not hesitate another second and quickly grabbed the handle. Clearly driven to desperation, Sazin immediately charged at him with the rake. "Get lost, or I'll smash your head in." Even though she tried to act strong, she could not hide the fear deep in her heart. "How far can a demon follow me? How am I supposed to escape it?" Julian looked at Sazin with an unpleasant expression, though most striking of all were his emotionless eyes. Watching her use a rake as a weapon, Julian silently judged her. Like a child, a heathen slave, Sazin's face darkened, and she clenched her teeth, trying to steady herself. But her hand still trembled violently from nerves as she tightened her grip on the rake. He curled his lips into a sinister smile, openly belittling Sazin's fighting ability. She seemed to turn to stone for a moment as she thought about Julian's temperament. He definitely isn't normal. Sazin wanted to know why he had treated them so cruelly. "Why did you kill those innocent horses?" Julian answered calmly, as if it were nothing serious at all. They were horses of the royal family. He had his own way of thinking. For war horses, that was an honorable death. Feeling pity for their short lives, she could not help but wonder, what nonsense is he talking about? Did those horses actually ask him to grant them an honorable death? Julian was immediately added to Sazin's blacklist. I'm sure he's a madman obsessed with killing. She decided to attack him head on. "Stop spouting that nonsense and get lost." Julian easily dodged Seizen's attack, even though the distance between them was less than an arm's length. Just hurling the rake at him had already drained half her strength. In the blink of an eye, he blocked Seizen's attack by catching the rake. She was stunned by Julian's terrifying strength. No one could have imagined the scene. He lifted Seizen up with one hand. At last, she had to admit that Julian's strength was no joke. He lifted me with one hand. He definitely isn't human. Only then did he finally explain his controversial actions. Those horses had been to the battlefield. They ate poisonous mushrooms in the forest. They were about to die, their whole bodies paralyzed, about to suffer unbearable pain. Horses like that deserve to die with honor. Seizen panicked as she realized who he really was. What did he just say? Poisonous mushrooms? Battlefield? No way. Could he be a royal knight? Julian's image had long since pushed her thoughts in a dark direction. Has he lived his whole life shrouded in that much killing intent? It was unclear what exactly fell to the ground. Seizen froze in shock when she saw her best friend standing right in front of her. Bakon, startled and worried, Bakon hurried over to help. What happened? Julian let go of the rake, causing Seizen to fall to the ground. In that dangerous moment, Seizen instinctively ran straight over and threw herself into Bakon's arms. The emblem on the armor caught Bakon's attention. She froze. A royal knight? Terrified, Seizen clung tightly to Bakon and burst into tears. Oh no, Bakon saw it too. Only now did Seizen realize how serious this was. Just for raising a rake against a royal knight, she could lose her head. Julian's footsteps slowly approached them. She didn't want to accept this cruel reality. Had she struggled so hard here only to die like this? She had to get out of here. Seizen quietly bent down, grabbed a handful of sand, then rushed forward and flung it straight into his face. Julian reeled in pain and dizziness from the sudden attack. After that reckless move, Seizen immediately grabbed Bakon's hand and dragged her away, not daring to look back. Sometime later, she and Bakon stopped in the flower garden, both exhausted and gasping for breath after running so far. Bakon couldn't understand Seizen's strange behavior and asked worriedly, "Is it really okay for us to run away like this?" He looked like a proper gentleman. There was even a royal insignia engraved on his armor. Seizen stared in surprise. Really? What should have been nothing had turned into a huge disaster because of her overthinking. Why hadn't she realized it? She had been so obsessed with the idea that there were ghosts here. Seizen pretended not to care, but she was really trying to calm herself down. It was dark then, so he probably didn't see as clearly. The royal household has more than 1 or 2 slaves. She had never sounded so calm. We just need to avoid attention for a while and live as if we don't exist. Bakon, tense and doubtful, asked, "Can that really work? What if he was the emperor? I heard the emperor has blonde hair too." Still smiling lightly and not looking worried at all, Seizen waved a hand. "Come on, didn't everyone say the emperor wouldn't arrive for another 3 days? And if that really was the emperor, why would he be standing alone in the stables like some ghost? The emperor should return in glory and splendor." Scene change, just as she had predicted. The next day, the air was filled with celebration to welcome the emperor's return. The streets were packed everywhere. The gathered citizens all chattered excitedly. "Look, it's that murderous emperor." "Where?" "Oh, he doesn't look like I imagined." Something made Seizen stand frozen in the middle of the crowd. The emperor strode forward in proud, commanding splendor. He wore a magnificent imperial robe, and his face was flawlessly handsome. The emperor was none other than him, the man who had brought down a war horse with a single stroke of his sword, the devil in her eyes, who had even smiled wickedly after Seizen punched him in the face. Seizen was utterly horrified by her own disrespectful actions. How could I have done that? The deep blue sky today seemed brighter beneath the beauty of the moonlight. The soldiers stood in strict formation awaiting orders. Seizen trembled and struggled as Julian's men bound her hands. Her voice shook as she knelt respectfully before Julian. "My lord." He sat in his chair, listening as Colin reported, "We finally caught that rat of a meddler." Julian coldly interrogated her again. "Whose orders are you serving under?" A few minutes earlier, a maid had come pushing a cart laden with luxurious dishes. It was Seizen. She wore her best clothes and pushed the cart along while nervously glancing around. Countless questions filled her mind. Why did His Majesty come back? She could see that everyone was in a panic. How long had it been since the previous emperor died and the chancellor seized power? So was the current emperor of the empire Chancellor Elbert? Even a song sung about him didn't seem to put that much pressure on him. Worry flashed in her eyes as she secretly resolved herself. We absolutely have to do everything perfectly at this rate. The whole empire may be drenched in blood later. Sazin silently reassured herself, I shouldn't worry so much. Maybe none of this has anything to do with me anyway. When night fell, in a storage room in the slave quarters by the stables, someone came in carrying a plate of food. It was Sazin. She stepped forward with a bright smile. I'm back on. Guess what I brought? I was really lucky today. I got assigned as a kitchen helper, and suddenly, Sazin froze and stared wide-eyed in one direction. The room was empty. There wasn't a single person there. Confused, she muttered, back on? Where did she go? She should have finished her work at the stables long ago. Without warning, someone lunged at her from behind. Just as she was about to turn and see what was happening, she was struck with a brutal blow, followed by sounds of struggling. Back in the present, a harsh and icy voice rang out. Who are you working for? Sazin was drenched in sweat, her face filled with fear and confusion. What is this? What's going on? Julian's face was cold and sharp, one hand propping up his chin, two knights standing behind him. Are you one of Elbert's lackeys? Did he send you to spy on the Emperor? Sazin was stunned. Elbert? Chancellor Elbert? At that, her face turned pale, and she hurriedly explained, no, of course not. How could someone like me possibly know a noble person like that? Julian narrowed his eyes and looked at her coldly. No, weren't you the one who claimed we met by chance while you were sneaking around after me like a rat? Elbert has planted countless eyes throughout the imperial palace. I wouldn't put it past him to use an outsider slave. Sazin trembled all over and protested weakly. I really didn't know you were the Emperor. I just thought you were someone who cruelly liked tormenting horses. That only made him more suspicious, and he fixed her with a frightening stare. Tormenting them? Faced with Julian, she panicked. No, that's not what I meant. Calmly and leisurely, he pressed her further. So what you mean is that an emperor like me is a murderer? A chill ran down Sazin's spine. How does he know? But things had already come to this, so she could only desperately defend herself. It's just that a lowly slave like me could never understand your majesty's deeper intentions. You only wanted to protect the honor of those war horses. You are not a murderer. I truly didn't know. Julian turned away, looking displeased. It seems you speak without thinking. His expression darkened in thought. The Chancellor isn't clever enough to be behind that, but even a stone by the roadside can be sharp enough to cut flesh. Julian recalled how everyone around him had been sent off by that man's hand. It had always been like that. As for the horse he had put down that night, those were war horses trained over a very long time. Through the endless war, none of them had shown any problems. Could it be that he fed them poisonous mushrooms? That couldn't have been an accidental poisoning. Elbert, were you hoping to see me thrown from my horse to my death? He clicked his tongue, frowning impatiently. The nonsense you're saying might actually be true. Julian snapped his fingers meaningfully. The man who was with you that night said the same thing. Colin immediately understood, gestured with his hand, and ordered, bring him in. An uneasy premonition rose in her chest. Terrified, Sazin turned her head. Sure enough, Bakon was being dragged in by the guards. Sazin cried out anxiously, Bakon. The moment Bakon saw her, she let out a breath of relief and forced a stiff smile. Sazin, a soldier, shoved her forward roughly. Startled and off balance, Bakon panicked. Where are we going? She was pushed to the front of a room. Sazin was horrified when she heard terrifying roars from inside. Was that a lion? No way. Julian used Bakon to threaten her. Depending on whether you tell the truth, your brother will either live or become food for the lions. Sazin lowered her head in shock. What truth is he talking about? Wait, brother? She suddenly realized in astonishment. He thinks I'm a boy. The dirt obscuring her features, the men's clothes, the smell of horse dung. Was that why he thought she was male? Inside the dark room, the ferocious lion slowly advanced toward Bakon. Suddenly, as she stumbled back in panic, Bakon bumped into the rake. Julian gave a cold, mocking smile, full of contempt. How dare you mock the Emperor, and then run away? Bakon picked up the stick, her whole body trembling with fear. Oh no! Terrified, Sazin hurried forward on her knees to take the blame. My lord, if punishment must be given, then punish me. Bakon is truly innocent. Julian paid no heed and looked down at her coldly. I'll decide for myself whether she is guilty. Inside the room, the lion let out a savage roar and lunged toward its prey. Bakon had only a stick to defend herself, and helplessness filled her face. At that moment, Sazin shouted angrily, her voice full of resolve. I can prove it. Hearing that, a command rang out at the exact instant the lion was about to pounce. Stop. The lion immediately looked at him pitifully. It became obedient as a puppy, while Bacon's face had already gone pale blue with sheer terror. Julian looked at Sazin suspiciously. Prove it? Sazin's mind was spinning in panic. Yes, Bacon and I are slaves brought here from a southern island. Inwardly, she was frantic. What do I do now? I need to find something important. Kneeling at his feet, she tried to explain clearly. We've fed the horses and cleaned their dung for 3 whole years. We aren't allowed to leave our assigned area by even a single step. How could I ever have imagined the first person I'd run into would be your majesty? Julian gave an emotionless sneer. Of course there can be exceptions. If you were useful, people would have noticed and mocked you long ago. Her mind was in total chaos. I can't think of anything. If only I hadn't raised that rake. In that life-and-death moment, she fumbled out a plea. Please give me a chance. I'll show you who we really are. Yet her thoughts kept sinking deeper into panic. Bacon will be killed, think. Julian's voice turned grim, chilling the air. You'd better answer carefully. If you don't take responsibility for your words, your sibling will die. Her head lowered until it was nearly touching his shoes. Dizzy and faint, she urged herself inwardly. Think. Sazin stammered then. Suddenly, in those final moments, an idea flashed through her mind. Abruptly, Sazin's expression hardened. She remembered something. No way. That man. Was he the Emperor? Sazin had only seen the back of a blonde-haired man. Then it hit her. The man in her dream, with savage eyes and a knife in his hand, was the Emperor. Back then, Julian had seemed strangely pitiful. He had even raised the sword to his own throat. I could feel how frightened he was. I have to say it now. Gathering all her courage, she made a bold proposal. Your Majesty, you can't set your sword aside in the dark, can you? I can help rid you of that nightly fear. Julian's eyes widened in shock. What? I'm not afraid of the dark. Sazin remembered how lonely and miserable Julian had looked then. He had been frightened like a child who had just lost his mother. She looked up at him, determination clear in her eyes. In any case, your Majesty always dreads nightfall, because when it comes, the blood in your body heats up. I have a way to make you more comfortable. The whole atmosphere seemed to freeze, and no one knew how to react. A moment later, Colin was the first to burst out laughing. My goodness, your Majesty, don't be so shy. Julian fell silent, then warned him coldly. Be quiet, Colin. That night, in the darkness, inside the grand and luxurious castle, moonlight and flickering fireflies shone through the window. In a small room with a quiet, almost magical stillness, a man carefully and silently wiped down his sword. It was Julian, sitting deep in thought. Suddenly, a girl with long flowing hair approached. He cast her an indifferent glance. So you've come. Sazin was now dressed in a gorgeous gown. Her small face was tense and serious as she answered, Yes, your Majesty. Bright moonlight poured into Julian's room. Resting his chin on one hand, he turned his sharp eyes toward her and thought, how does she know? He had no small amount of curiosity about Sazin. How did she know I can't put down my sword once night falls? Julian carefully reviewed everything in his mind. He was certain he had never told anyone. Beside him, Colin dutifully stood straight and read his report. According to the people we sent to watch the Chancellor, he has not bribed any of the slaves in the stables. Based on the report, your Majesty has nothing to worry about. After finishing the report, Colin tossed the stack of papers onto the tea table and dashed over to where Julian sat, shouting excitedly. However, those slaves aren't real siblings. Julian responded with indifferent curiosity. They're not? Colin, thrilled as if he had struck gold, told Julian, I thought that one was a man, but it turns out she's a woman. Julian lazily cut him off. If I don't see that one again, there won't be any problem. Hearing that, Colin awkwardly pleaded with him. What? No, you really need to listen this time. Julian waved him away coldly. I already said enough. Is there something wrong with your ears? There's nothing left to investigate. You should go take a bath. Thick-skinned as ever, Colin stayed right there, clenching his hands and trying to persuade him. It's true, I don't need a bath. Then, suddenly stunned, he remembered how he had once clung on like a dog, only to get brutally punched away by Julian. All right, my lord, I need to tell you this. Enough, idiot. Colin helplessly pressed his lips together, glanced away, and cursed under his breath. Damn it. Sulking, he muttered. Isn't there anything that could surprise your majesty? I'm honestly really looking forward to seeing what that so-called male slave can do. You'll be shocked, just wait. Back in the present, Sazin stood there with a perfectly graceful figure, wearing a pale yellow dress patterned with tiny purple roses and leaves, like a little sun appearing in Julian's room. The moment he saw her, he froze for a full 5 seconds, mouth slightly open. Once he came back to himself, he asked coldly and suspiciously, "Who are you?" Bashfully, in a small, timid voice, she answered, "I am Sazin, the slave who said she would help your majesty escape your fear of the dark." Only then did Julian remember the report he had dismissed earlier that afternoon. Colin, her. He seriously questioned her. "You said you'd help me overcome my fear of the dark. So what exactly are you going to do?" Calmly, Sazin explained, "The people of the Southern Island are often born with the ability to see illusions and control magic. It is because of that inborn gift that I was able to see your majesty. I can see that you're sinking into dark illusions." Flustered, Sazin waved her hands and hurried to add, "Ah, of course, that doesn't mean I'm a witch or anything." Julian remained silent and glanced sideways. In a cold, indifferent tone, he said, "I don't care whether you're a witch or not." Julian looked exhausted, but his hand still gripped the sword tightly as he laid down his condition. "Help me sleep, and I can let you live." Tense, Sazin obeyed. Understood. Inwardly, she told herself, "This is my last chance. Come on." She focused and shifted into the material plane, seeing through everything in the room. "First, I need to focus on the most noticeable thing." Some object was emitting red energy from the corner of the nightstand. Sazin quickly hurried over, sat down by the cabinet, opened the drawers one by one, and searched through them. Julian stared in shock and warned her, "Shameless. How dare you touch my things?" In one small drawer, she touched a dark red pouch. It was exactly what she had been looking for. Sazin immediately pulled it out and lowered her voice as she explained, "I'm sorry. I sensed something very strange here. This is enough." Then she opened the pouch. Julian spoke in confusion. "This." A dark, sinister aura rose from a human-shaped doll wrapped all over in black cords covered in sharp thorns. Holding the doll in her hand, Sazin examined it for a while before explaining, "It looks like this thing's limbs are tightly bound. The intent here is to compress the victim's nerves through a cursed doll. This is something used to kill people." After hearing that, Julian gave a contemptuous laugh. "You're bold, saying something even a newborn child would know." On the surface, he forced himself to stay calm, but inside he was seething with rage. In truth, there was nowhere in this palace that Albert had not already manipulated. "How dare you pull a stunt like this in my room? I'll make you pay dearly for it." While Julian sat there blankly, lost in thought, Sazin had already walked over to a candle. "Calm down. I'll burn it." He jolted in shock and confusion. "What? Is it all right for you to act so recklessly?" As Sazin set the doll on fire, she answered calmly, "Black magic can only be broken once it no longer exists. When someone uses magic, the magic they cast can affect their own body as well. Now the price has changed. The one who did this will bear a burn on their body." A circle of black magic appeared, its chaotic power rebounding in backlash. Sazin stood silently, watching the final fragments of the doll burn away on the floor. Julian observed in secret and marveled. He couldn't believe she had discovered something like this the moment she arrived. He felt a flicker of admiration for the young girl. She really was remarkable. Once the doll had burned to black ash on the floor, Sazin relaxed. "All right, that takes care of one problem." She turned and smiled gracefully as she reminded him, "Your Majesty, it's late now. You need to go to sleep." Julian obeyed and lay down on the bed, but his suspicion did not vanish. He still kept his sword by his side. Sazin walked over and sat at the edge of his bed. Cheerfully, she suggested a game. "Your Majesty, have you ever played a word chain game?" He looked puzzled. "A word chain game? Is that the method you mentioned earlier?" Sazin laughed. "Something like that. Shall we try it?" Julian coldly warned her, leaving her speechless. "You're quite brave, gambling with your life by playing a game like this with me." Sazin thought to herself that she ought to do something to ease the tension first. Pretending not to hear the warning, she awkwardly said, "Then I'll start." First, he lay there, frowning as he watched her chatter by the bedside. Sazin hesitated and asked, "Am I supposed to play by myself?" In the end, Julian sighed in reluctant concession and agreed. He said a word, "Swamp." Sazin blinked in confusion. Julian tried to cover the awkwardness. "I suppose that word wasn't very suitable." She stammered and continued from his word. "Blood." He was no less quick, replying at once, "Conspiracy." As they played, Sazin worried inwardly. Is this really all right? The two of them continued back and forth for a while. December. Joyful. Julian came up with a difficult one. Gun. Sazin faltered. What can I even say now? He smirked smugly. There aren't many words for that. Sazin struggled and finally squeezed one out. Hunter. A hunter. Julian immediately answered in a dark voice, "Disease." Hearing that, Sazin was startled by how frightening this man could be. Why is that so scary? After thinking for a bit longer, she continued, "June." Julian's eyes suddenly softened as he repeated it. "June." Sazin lowered her gaze and said gently, "Take your time thinking about it, however long you need." And just like that, Julian drifted off to sleep before he even realized it. His eyes closed, his breathing light and even. Then, beneath the candlelight, a dark aura suddenly appeared around the sleeping Julian, making his brows knit together. Sazin had been sitting there on watch, waiting for this exact moment, and quickly seized the chance. Now, she raised a hand before him and cast a light spell threaded with tiny sparks of lightning. She was using her magic to erase that dark, sinister aura around him. If I use magic like this, he'll sleep better and won't have nightmares anymore. After treating him for a while, she withdrew her hand. His breathing returned to its steady rhythm. Sazin set the sword down beside the bed. Then she pulled over a chair. Curling up on it, she let out a relieved breath. Good. Sazin fell silent in thought. I had my suspicions, but luckily everything went according to plan. Magic really is useful in a lot of situations. She rejoiced inwardly. I don't need to worry anymore. I'm no longer prey for a lion. Remembering that morning, Julian's stern order echoed in her mind. Throw her into prison. She looked forward to tomorrow. Bacon will be released tomorrow, right? After a long, exhausting day, she closed her eyes and drifted off with eager anticipation. Bacon, tomorrow will finally be able to go home safely. Julian's expression darkened as he assessed her. Sazin flinched guiltily and avoided his gaze. Julian then jolted awake from a long sleep. Looking around at his surroundings, he suddenly remembered. Did I fall asleep? At the end, was she praying for something? His gaze dropped to his own hand as he thought to himself, I didn't even have a nightmare. Only after long, did he notice that Sazin had fallen asleep in the chair. Julian sank into thoughts about the intense sensations of the previous night. When night fell and his blood heated up, it was usually that sensation that brought pleasure and indulgence. And yet, then he moved closer and placed a hand on the side of the chair, making her start awake. Seeing the handsome face right in front of her, Sazin jumped and blurted out, Your Majesty, the EMP, what? Julian looked at her flustered state and gave a faint smile. Something that begins with EMP. I just remembered it. Empire. Sazin froze slightly when she heard him. You've proven your ability. I'll grant you a reward. She could not help but question it inwardly. A reward? Covering her face, she rejoiced endlessly inside. Bacon, helping His Majesty sleep really was a good thing. I did it. Sazin began wondering what reward would be most fitting for herself. Should I ask for a lavish meal? No, I should ask him to give us our freedom. But that train of thought was cut short by his next words. From now on, you'll serve me at night. Sazin was stunned by what she heard. Like a close personal attendant, she pondered it for a moment. I thought all I had to do was clear up the misunderstanding, but I didn't expect to be trusted this much. Sazin began weighing the benefits of this decision. A close attendant to the Emperor. The conditions would definitely be better than before, considering my status. Julian gradually lost patience when she still gave no response and pointed at her forehead. What is this? Are you shaking your head? His face turned more serious than ever, his voice oppressive. Right in front of the Emperor, who is waiting for an answer. Watching Julian's expression, she sensed something unusual and understood at once. This is an offer I can't refuse. Lowering her head awkwardly, Sazin said, I'm only a lowly slave. How could I possibly become a close attendant? He asked with suspicion. Is the work of a servant like you really that difficult? She was growing tense, sweat beading before she even noticed, and spoke in a trembling voice. But the Chancellor won't sit still and allow it. Julian was taken aback by those words. He suddenly remembered the servant's conversation. The Emperor is returning? Then it seems even the Chancellor must be panicking. Is it still not too late? I wonder if there's anything the Emperor can still handle on his own besides going to the battlefield. Julian reminded himself inwardly that Chancellor Elbert could indeed refuse. His gaze darkened at once, and his voice became sharper. Then Julian grew angry, his hand loosening as he kept demanding, "Are you telling me I need to ask the Chancellor for permission?" Realizing she had said the wrong thing, she shrank into herself in alarm. Is it really that difficult? In any case, if the Chancellor finds out I've started living here, he'll probably throw me out. Looking at the man before her, Sazin could not help but worry. Someone had placed a curse in the Emperor's bedroom, a place regarded as sacred. Did he understand what that meant? An emperor who had lost his authority could never protect a slave. In the end, she made up her mind. I need something to protect myself. For a long moment, the two of them stayed silent, saying nothing. After venting a bit of his anger, he only let out a sigh and said, then Sazin, her hair in disarray, finally relaxed a little and thought to herself, I thought he was going to take revenge on me. She gradually regained her composure and continued explaining. As a close attendant, besides fighting black magic, I would also have to carry out many secret investigations. But as you know, there are many limitations on a slave. Folding his arms, Julian replied calmly. So according to you, a slave cannot become a close attendant? Whenever she faced him, waves stirred in Sazin's heart. It was shameful, but now was precisely the chance to make the Emperor see that he needed her. In an instant, she cast aside her negative thoughts and told herself firmly, this is my chance to escape a slave's life. Sazin's eyes turned resolute as she declared, yes, a lowly slave does not deserve to stand beside the Emperor, the son of the Empire and the highest seat of all. Julian's face did not change at first, but when he saw her firmness, he could not help feeling satisfied. But unlike his emotion, she was frightened by that expression. Did he just smile at me? As he spoke, Julian moved in closer. A slave truly does not suit the Supreme Emperor. The instant Sazin leaned back, he swiftly wrapped an arm around her slender waist in an ambiguously intimate gesture and whispered, you will do it. She grew even more terrified, but still tried to calm herself. We're only talking, right? Then why does it feel like there's a scent of death all around here? A strange morning passed, full of unsettling things. As usual, Colin entered the study with a bright expression and asked, Your Majesty, did you sleep well? In contrast to Colin's cheerful demeanor, Julian answered calmly, I never expected you to come check on me, running here like a dog. Not only did Colin not get angry, he even looked impressed and agreed. Dogs are usually very good at sniffing out strange things. Please tell your servant about last night. We've been friends for years, after all, so I should know, shouldn't I? Then the two of them spoke about the previous night. It's been a long time since I slept that well. You do look very refreshed. But how was she able to help you sleep? Julian's tone sharpened. So, you already knew that Slave was a woman? You deceived me while claiming we were friends. Colin, who had been cheerful just moments before, froze at the accusation. That really was surprising. I thought something was being hidden, so I went into the bathhouse to take a look. Julian, who had been writing intently, stopped his pen. He looked up and demanded, Stop making excuses. Did you see all of it? The naked body of my slave. What? Colin had no idea what was happening and kept rambling. My slave? Well, I couldn't see everything clearly because the servants were bathing her, so she covered herself, but judging by her figure, she was definitely a woman. I was surprised too. Once it was confirmed, Julian was left speechless. Furious, he ordered Colin, Yes, stop your nonsense and get out. Go to the training grounds. Colin only stared blankly and replied, Something like that. You don't want to say anything else. Julian continued to bark. Have you put away the weapons? Colin innocently answered, I had the soldiers do it. At that, Julian flew into a rage. Don't leave it to servants or soldiers. Check the condition and number of the arrows and spears yourself. Maintain the training and combat facilities. I'm also very curious whether the new warhorse has been trained yet. Startled by the reaction, Colin quickly looked for a way out. Why is he so furious? I need to run. Yes, understood. But Julian still did not seem willing to let him off. Colin, make sure to inspect the soldiers' bodies as well. Colin nearly jumped out of his skin and shouted, Hey, that's disgusting and horrifying. Julian did not answer. He only smiled gently at the guard standing before him. Julian continued instructing him, Examine the soldiers from head to toe. Check whether any of their toenails are rotting from fungus. Check whether there are wounds on their sides from arrows. I imagine some of them even have hemorrhoids from too much nighttime activity. It is a commander's duty to worry about his soldiers. Colin could hardly believe his eyes and stammered, "Your Majesty, did I do something wrong?" Julian's expression did not change as he calmly explained, "No, I simply want you to become a commander who always tends carefully even to the smallest of his soldiers' wounds." Colin fell into despair, endlessly doubting himself. Then Julian suddenly recalled something. "You saw it, didn't you? The naked body of my slave." "You, my slave?" At last Colin understood the lesson he had once been taught. First, when serving an emperor with an unpredictable temperament, remember this: everything belonging to the emperor must be offered to him first. He immediately dropped to one knee on the ground. Still thinking of that rule, he stammered out a plea, "I repent." At that moment, the housekeeper could not hold back a quiet laugh and thought, how lovely. The servants were all left dazed by what was happening before their eyes. Afterward, they turned and whispered among themselves, "She's a little masculine, but she looks like a foreign, noble woman." A delicate-featured woman followed the servant's guidance. "Come along. His Majesty is waiting." Voices rose all around in unison. "Look at her." Sazin timidly hid behind Catherine. In this world, there was only one person who could define what she truly was. His Majesty had once said that if there were a stone on the ground, and he declared it a jewel, then from that moment on, it would be a jewel. She was the same. Catherine walked calmly ahead, her voice stern and solemn, while Sazin followed quietly behind. "So devote yourself wholeheartedly to His Majesty." Catherine turned to look at her, her serious eyes delivering the reminder. As soon as the sound of their footsteps ceased, she respectfully announced, "I have brought the maid, Your Majesty." Julian was seated on a luxurious sofa, a report in one hand, the other resting along the back of the seat. His posture was so relaxed it was almost languid. Interrupted by her voice, he lifted his head, and his gaze was instantly caught by the sight before him. Sazin stood there, quiet yet captivating. Her smooth white skin stood out beneath the splendid Middle Eastern attire. Her brown hair fell softly beneath a thin veil, and her fragile-looking eyes were impossible to look away from. Most of all, her slender waist was emphasized. Julian froze, blushed, and turned his head away. Does the southern island also have this kind of clothing? Slightly flustered, he quickly called her over. "Come here." Inside the spacious room, soft light filtered through the towering windows, falling neatly over the two figures. He glanced at the sheet of paper in his hand. "This is the thing that binds you." It was the document certifying her status as a slave. It was only a single sheet of paper, but to Sazin, it weighed as heavily as chains. Her eyes unconsciously fixed on its edge. Calmly, he held the paper toward the burning candle, and it quickly burned away. Sazin went still, her eyes widening in shock as she silently watched the ashes fall one by one. "That paper!" Julian brushed off his hands and looked at her. "You're no longer a lowly slave, so being by my side will no longer be a problem." Choked with emotion, Sazin quickly covered her mouth and gave thanks inwardly. "Dear Your Majesty, now I can earn money openly and return to the island." Without another word, Julian pulled out a strange rectangular object. His icy expression cut straight through her rush of emotion. "This is a contract." Sazin stared blankly. "It is written on it were detailed terms and a specific duration. The contract would remain in effect until the Emperor's illness was cured and the Empress was brought back." Sazin went deathly still in shock. "This is insane. When will that ever happen? How is this any different from a slave paper?" The sheet in her hand was clenched nearly out of shape. Julian remained leisurely seated as he ordered, "Put your seal at the bottom." She froze, her breath catching, her expression nearly stiff with disbelief. After a long moment, she replied in confusion, I don't have a seal or anything like that." Julian's gaze remained calm, his chin propped on one hand, his posture utterly at ease. He gave a faint smile, his lowered lashes and subtle curve of his lips somehow unsettling. One hand still supported his chin, his golden hair falling softly and heightening his almost bewitching elegance. In the other hand, somehow a small sword had already appeared. His voice was even calm to a chilling degree. "A hand will do." Julian unconsciously stretched out and yanked Sazin's wrist hard, making her freeze on the spot. Her face turned pale, and with panicked eyes, she looked down at him. Her body wavered, gradually losing balance. and Sazin trembled as she cried out, "Your Majesty." He remained indifferent, as if he saw nothing, stubbornly refusing to let go. She flailed in midair, then fell straight down. Julian was startled stiff. Sazin was beyond saving as she fell. She collapsed right into Julian's chest, but he showed no intention of dodging, which only made her panic more, and the whole scene became awkward. As if waking from a brief dream, Sazin suddenly realized, wait, am I falling onto His Majesty? So flustered that her limbs tangled, she hurriedly pushed him away, her body instantly retreating on reflex. "Please forgive me, Your Majesty." Sazin stood frozen in place, her mind blank. She hurriedly raised a hand to cover her mouth, her eyes constantly darting toward Julian to gauge his reaction. Meanwhile, his hand also rose unconsciously to his face, as if he wanted to hide the quiet disturbance rising in his heart. That reaction left her with a huge question in her mind. What kind of response was that? Julian pretended to look away. She maintained a calm expression, but inside, she was a tangled mess. Sazin recalled the stories people spread about him. Hadn't he already married twice? Both of those women had died young, but he looked completely different from the time he had slaughtered that warhorse like a demon. He lowered his head and covered his face with one hand, as if trying to hide his confused emotions. Sazin merely watched in silence, and the room suddenly fell quiet. After hesitating for a long while, she finally spoke to break the cold atmosphere. I should get going. If you need one, I could go make a seal or something like that." But Julian stopped her. "Just sit down." She looked at the contract laid neatly on the table. Beside it was a small, gleaming sword. A trace of expectation flashed across her face. "Right now, I heard that if I become Your Majesty's maid, the housekeeper will pay me 100 crowns a week." He sat upright on the sofa with one leg crossed over the other, his gaze fixed on the paper before him. "I will give you 1,000 crowns a month." The moment the words left his mouth, Sazin could no longer contain her happiness. "What? 1,000 crowns?" Seeing her reaction, he frowned slightly in puzzlement. "What? You don't like it? Is it not enough?" Sazin's eyes shone as if she had just struck gold. "No, not at all. Where can I get a seal?" He hesitated for a moment, then made a decision. "Fine. No seal is needed. We can make a blood oath instead." His suggestion confused her enough that she blurted out, Julian began to explain. "In the East, we drink wine mixed with each other's blood. It symbolizes unchanging loyalty to one's master, and in return, the master will trust and protect their person." The smile at the corners of Sazin's lips vanished. She turned her eyes to him, but Julian still kept his head lowered, his gaze seemingly avoiding hers on purpose, saying nothing more. Once again, Sazin looked down at the contract. She paused for a moment. A blood oath. Was that what he wanted to make? "Your Majesty, are you sure you want to give 1,000 crowns to someone like me?" She could not hide her unease, her anxious gaze fixed on Julian as she waited for a clear confirmation from him. Julian immediately affirmed it. "To obtain your strength and loyalty. Even if you are a slave, you possess magic. Therefore, I must acknowledge your worth and pay a price equal to it." His actions made her unable to stop doubting. The Emperor of Gidus was not some heartless man without a heart after all. "I thought he was treating me this well because he had some other scheme." Her eyes lowered slightly, and her mind was still full of unanswered questions. "Acknowledging my worth." But in the end, she still chose to place her trust in him and sign the contract. Then she took the sword and lightly cut the tip of her finger. A few drops of syrup like blood slowly flowed out. Sazin slowly touched her finger to the signature box, her gaze distant. Perhaps seeing His Majesty in my dreams was God's revelation to me. She sought a little peace of mind amidst all her hesitation. As she was gently wiping the blood from her finger, Julian decisively held out a sheet of paper. "And this, in other words, is a guarantee." With just one glance at the picture and a few lines of information, she immediately recognized it. Bacon's slave document. A flicker of surprise crossed Sazin's eyes, mixed with suspicion. A guarantee. The atmosphere sank when Julian warned her, "If you dare betray me or fail to fully carry out your duties and responsibilities during the term of the contract." Before he could even finish, Sazin's expression had already darkened. "I will kill that slave in front of you." That elegant face of his kept producing icy, cutting words. Bacon, in the picture, seemed terrified enough to burst into tears. Looking at the man before her, she could not help cursing inwardly. Damn it, this bastard. Time flew by like a dog running across an open field. 1 month later. After struggling with a heap of complicated rules, the long day finally came to an end. Sazin stood leaning weakly against the door, grumbling. I've worked hard learning etiquette for an entire month, and I've helped His Majesty sleep well too. Julian was always strange and impossible to predict, like a great bear wrapped in a quiet exterior but filled with danger. She could not remember how many times she had asked herself, why haven't I been allowed to see Bacon when I'm right here in front of him? The last time I saw her, lost in thought, she was suddenly reminded by the housekeeper, I already told you, you are not allowed to come and go from the main hall where His Majesty is. Do not take a single step where you have not been permitted. What I mean is, all our attention must be focused on His Majesty. Annoyed, she turned and walked away, arms crossed over her chest, muttering nonstop, yeah, I just have to coax him to sleep. A few fragments of happy memories with Bacon suddenly came rushing back, and her heart sank. I'm so worried about her, and I miss her. I should just ask him directly. She hesitated outside Julian's room. He was not as calm a person as she had once thought. Sazin took a deep breath, then decided to step forward and knock. Your Majesty, it's me. She waited a long time, but the inside remained silent. Then suddenly there was a noise. A sense of dread surged through her, and without hesitation, she shoved the door open. Your Majesty! Her eyes swept rapidly across the room in disarray, a lamp lying toppled on the floor. Julian was collapsed on the ground, his face twisted in pain. One hand clutched his head while the other tried to grip the side of a chair. For a moment, she refused to accept what she was seeing. On the other side, he kept rubbing his head frantically, teeth clenched tight, his whole body rigid, groans of pain spilling continuously from his mouth. As soon as her brain regained its basic reflexes, Sazin looked at him with unsteady eyes, and her thoughts finally clicked into place. Has he been hypnotized? After a few seconds of collecting herself, she hurriedly rushed to Julian's side. Your Majesty! His expression suddenly changed. His eyes widened as he stared straight at Sazin, cold enough to suffocate. Julian abruptly hurled his fist toward her. The sudden action threw Sazin into panic. Her whole body stiffened, and she instinctively recoiled, then fell hard to the ground. Before her eyes could even focus, she saw Julian towering right in front of her. That icy stare made her tremble. Julian's eyes had gone hollow, and his ashen face gave off an unprecedented pressure. Even so, Sazin tried to stay calm and soothe him. Your Majesty, it's Sazin. Please calm down. But the only response she got was his freezing gaze. Julian lunged forward and wrapped his hand around her throat. Acting on pure instinct, Sazin used every ounce of strength she had to try to pry his cold, merciless hands off her. Looking at the young man before her, she could not help blaming him inwardly. So now the doubt is cleared up. He's completely lost his mind. Is this the truth behind the rumors of the brutal emperor? The two of them were tangled together, one on top of the other, both their hands trembling as they held onto each other tightly. Suddenly, Sazin realized something. Maybe that black belt is the cause. If I can remove it. Trembling, she forced herself to call his name. Your Majesty. And helplessly she thought, at this rate, I can't do anything. The difference in strength is too great. Then suddenly, hearing her weak moan, Julian loosened his grip. Sazin had no strength left to think. She immediately seized the chance and reached toward him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. Julian's eyes widened, as if he had just awakened from an illusion, and the killing intent in his eyes gradually faded. Sazin steeled herself. Before I pass out, no matter what, I have to turn him back into the gentleman he was before. A brilliant holy light burst forth from her hand. That dazzling, warm light enveloped both of them. Sazin and Julian were equally shocked by the miraculous radiance, neither of them knowing how to react for a moment. After a while, the light gradually faded. Left in the room were the two of them, facing each other in awkward silence. Julian stared in astonishment, now restored to normal. Seeing that it had worked, Sazin was so happy her head spun, and then she collapsed sideways in a faint. You're back, right? The light of dawn shone brightly across Julian's handsome face. Only then did he fully come to himself. He reached out and caught Sazin, gently and uncertainly calling her name. Sazin, looking at the girl before him, now unconscious from everything that had just happened, with dark bruises still imprinted on her neck, he could not help blaming himself. Have I lost my mind again? Julian's eyes darkened, and he cursed himself inwardly in helplessness. She said she did this? Deep down, he tormented himself without stop, and even reproached Sazin as well. Sazin, I nearly killed you too. Scene shift. Before Seizen's eyes was a blood-soaked sight. It seemed that someone was being burned alive at the stake. Suddenly, she clutched her chest in pain. Why does it hurt so much? A deep hatred seemed to claw at her chest. She could almost clearly feel that suffocating emotion, anger, the feeling of betrayal. Whose feelings are these? Every night in my dreams, why does someone seem so sad? She jolted awake. Julian was keeping watch beside her. Your Majesty. Seeing that she had opened her eyes, he asked with concern, You're awake? She nodded vaguely. Yes. She thought to herself, that was only His Majesty's dream. This pain, he has had to feel it every night. Could this be because of the magic of the person who set up the curse doll? No matter what, we need a better way to protect him. Only then did she sit up and say to Julian, I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I thought that after destroying the cursed doll, I let my guard down. He only answered calmly. Actually, if it were that simple, he would never have left the palace. Thinking back, in the past that person had manipulated him cruelly. Poor Your Majesty. It looks like you went mad again. Did you take the medicine I gave you? Then she added, Why were you staring at the blood like that? You should listen to Elbert's instructions. You have to obey them. Seizen raised a hand to gently touch the wound on her neck, feeling a trace of sympathy. That helpless child is dead now, after being treated so cruelly. Then she asked him worriedly, Your Majesty, this isn't the first time this has happened, is it? Did the previous empresses die like this too? What she got in response was Julian's shamelessly rude attitude. Crossing his arms, he arrogantly shot back. What, are you scared? Flustered, she clasped her hands together and replied awkwardly, Yes. I need to know. He simply continued in a calm voice. I did not kill those empresses. We never even met, aside from the wedding ceremony. But a month later, rumors spread that they had been killed by the emperor. Hearing that, Seizen formed her own guess. There is some force plotting to make His Majesty lose power. Could someone powerful enough to do that be Chancellor Elbert? Then he turned the question back on her. If you're scared, why didn't you run? I nearly killed you. That left her so dumbfounded she did not know how to respond. Faced with that rough attitude of his, Seizen calmly answered, Because I am both Your Majesty's attendant and your mage. We made a blood oath, remember? Proudly, Seizen patted her chest. After all, as your servant, shouldn't I trust and protect you? That is my loyalty to Your Majesty. Julian was so surprised that his eyes widened. Moved, he hurriedly turned his face away and thought, I'm hearing those words from a servant who has only been with me for a month. The scene was strangely comical. On one side was Julian, the emperor of a nation, blushing red with shy happiness. On the other side was Seizen, deeply absorbed in thought. I can't let things stay like this. She recalled how strange it had seemed before. Even after finding and destroying the doll, they had remained silent. Finding it apparently had not helped at all. They can control His Majesty. Maybe this is exactly how His Majesty's faction was eliminated. She immediately jumped out of bed as naturally as could be. Please excuse me for a moment. Inwardly, she was thinking, how can I fix this when something like what happened today has already occurred? I can't break the spell. She rummaged through the place, searching for something. Right now, His Majesty is practically a walking weapon. It's too dangerous to let anyone come into contact with that magic. Then she peeked into another room. This is the side room used by the servants. This should do. After thoroughly checking the room, Seizen returned with peace of mind and informed Julian, starting tonight, I'll be staying by your side. He asked in shock, You mean you're going to stay by my side all night? Yes, I'll be in the next room. Upon hearing her answer, his expression suddenly darkened, his heart growing heavy. Seeing the wound on Seizen's neck that he himself had caused, he could not help feeling stricken. Then she asked him innocently, Your Majesty is very afraid, aren't you, of being protected like this? As though she had struck at his sore spot, he hurriedly changed the subject. No, it's over now. Just put me to sleep and then leave. Seeing that, Seizen quickly stopped him. This is only a temporary measure. There's still nothing we can do to truly protect Your Majesty. He looked at her, part helpless and part suspicious, and asked, Protect me? Seizen nodded. Because this happened through magic, we also need a method equally suited to counter it. He asked dubiously, You can still say that even after being strangled? Sensing his unwillingness, she hurriedly declared, I can't handle it, just like today. Seeing how stubborn she was, he could only snap helplessly. You would protect someone just because you were lucky enough to survive? That's bravery to the point of blindness. Even if I had a sword in my hand, would you still protect me? She answered bluntly, Of course. Why are you raising your voice like that? The two of them argued for a while. and then the atmosphere fell silent once more. Suddenly, Sazin offered a proposal. Your Majesty, I say this because I have an effective method. Then she said in a voice full of confidence, Your Majesty and I will become one. Hearing that, Julian stared at her in blank amazement. Huh, become one? Her eyes lit up brightly as she nodded in confirmation. In both body and spirit, we will be one. Hearing that, he could only struggle to regain control of himself, straightening his clothes as he stared at her with a stupefied face, questioning reality itself. Her eyes still shining, she nodded again. Your Majesty and I will share one body and one soul. Hearing that, he could only keep trying to compose himself, adjust his clothes, and stare at her in total disbelief. How can body and soul be shared? Me and you? Sazin eagerly leaned closer, all smiles. That's right. Do you want to know what kind of magic it is? Her actions startled Julian so badly that he panicked and shouted, Don't come so close so suddenly. Seeing his overblown reaction, she froze in stunned silence for a moment. At last, Sazin remembered how misleading her earlier words had sounded and came to her senses. Her face turned frantic as she hurriedly explained, Oh no, I didn't mean anything improper. I didn't mean a man and a woman living together in that kind of way. Turning his face elsewhere, Julian fell silent for a moment and then murmured, Ah, I see. His words only made her wonder, what on earth is His Majesty thinking? Sazin squeezed her eyes shut and shouted in flustered embarrassment. That's not it at all. How could someone like me possibly have improper intentions toward Your Majesty? Your Majesty isn't ordinary in the first place. Julian froze for a few seconds. Then he fell silent and asked directly, What does that mean? She awkwardly explained, What I'm talking about is a type of defensive magic. Sazin stammered, trying to explain, No, improper intentions? I truly don't have any improper thoughts toward Your Majesty at all. Julian sighed. That's not it. Looking at the Emperor before her, Sazin went silent, her head full of question marks, while he asked suspiciously, Didn't you just say, I'm not ordinary? Her face turned blank with confusion. Sazin fell into speechless contemplation. Does that even matter right now? I used to be a slave. How could I possibly look at His Majesty as if he were an ordinary person? How could I say something so disrespectful? Sazin called softly, Your Majesty. She respectfully corrected herself. You are not ordinary, but that is because you are the Emperor, the Sun, and the supreme ruler of the Lagardec Empire. Pleased with herself, she thought, Yes, that's what I meant. Seeing his stiff expression, she continued her flattery at full force. You are the king, the noblest, most outstanding, strongest, wisest, kindest, and most magnanimous person in the world, blessed besides with a noble bloodline. Hearing that, Julian frowned irritably. You really do know how to flatter. With a jealous undertone, he said, Don't you find it strange? It seems you prefer a small, insignificant person over an emperor. Sazin scratched her head, baffled and not understanding what he meant. Yes. Inwardly, she wondered because I have back on. Julian misunderstood her answer. His face darkened, and he trembled with anger. She said yes. He clenched his hand and reluctantly gave in. Fine. A moment later, Sazin seriously began to explain. Now I'll explain a little about this defensive magic that helps our bodies and minds become one. An image appeared of her and am bound together by strips of red ribbon. After placing Your Majesty's blood on an unused silk thread, before going to sleep, I'll chant a spell and bind Your Majesty's wrist and my ankle together, making them one. It won't take effect immediately, but if we keep doing it, I'll be able to bear the curse in your place. Looking toward the empty room beside us, Sazin patiently continued, So we have to stay close to each other. Since no one is using the room next door, I'll stay there. Julian lowered his face slightly, suspicious. You're going to use magic to confuse the target of the curse. She looked at him and smiled confidently. Yes, I'll bear all of it and destroy it. Looking at the tiny woman before him, Julian was doubtful. Although I don't know anything about magic, that sounds dangerous. But what about you? Is there no risk? Sazin looked a little uneasy herself. Depending on the type and intensity of the magic, my body could be harmed. An image of Julian appeared in her mind. But the curse Your Majesty is under isn't the kind that threatens your life. It's more like control. A crown flashed in her thoughts as well. Your Majesty still has no heir, so they wouldn't easily kill the only member of the royal family. Returning to reality, she asked him, Your Majesty, would you like to make a fist? At that, Julian also held out his clenched hand toward her. Test it. Sazin's eyes lit up with excitement. Just by looking, I can tell this punch is far less dangerous to control." Her words left him dumbfounded. "What?" She tilted her head and looked at him again, reassuring him with confidence. "In the end, if your majesty is ever in danger, I'll save you, okay? Just like the faith I showed today." Looking down at his own palm, Julian murmured uneasily, "I truly don't know what to say." He crossed his arms tightly and gave her one final fierce warning. "Think carefully. I don't want you to be so loyal that you kill yourself." Sazin whispered softly, "Don't worry." Beside the warmly glowing fireplace, something suddenly occurred to her. Wait, isn't he in a good mood right now? This is my chance." Sazin looked at him with trembling emotion and pleaded, "Your Majesty, may I leave the main palace for a little while? I won't go far." With eyes full of earnest longing, she looked at him. For a whole month I've had to study etiquette, and at night I still have to attend on you." Julian, easily softening, finally gave in and agreed. "All right, but don't go around telling people you're a slave." Her face lit up in a bright smile of joy. "Yes. Anyway, everyone already knows." Delighted, Sazin hurried off. "I'll be back soon." Right now, Sazin's mind was filled only with the image of the one she loved. Bakon, at last we can finally meet again. Her departing figure was clearly seen by Catherine. The woman slowly rested a hand on the door and opened it. Entering his room, Catherine announced, "Your Majesty, as I mentioned, tomorrow night there will be a banquet hosted by Chancellor Elbert. All the nobles of the Privy Council will attend." Looking at him, she lowered her voice. "That day, I would like to introduce you to Lady Satyr." Hearing the name, Julian went still. "Satyr? She bears Elbert's surname. The Chancellor has an unmarried daughter." Catherine sighed and shrugged. "If your Majesty would only bother to learn these things, you would know more." He nodded. "Oh, then we can at least see what she looks like." By the fireplace, Catherine carefully explained to Julian, "Lady Satyr entered the palace 3 years ago. She attended the Empress's instruction classes." He gave a dry laugh. 3 years." A dreadful sense of foreboding swept through Julian's memories. "Catherine, isn't that amusing?" Right after the second Empress of the Empire died, tapping lightly against the window frame with impatience, he mocked. A strange marriage was arranged so she could become the third wife. Even Catherine found it strange. It is odd. The position of Empress is not one that can be obtained easily, yet it was handed over to another family so readily. Julian gave a cold smile as he leaned against the window. "And so, I had to deal with 2 prestigious families that offered their daughters to the imperial house. There was no other choice. Now the Chancellor can easily place his own daughter into a position no one wants. If everything goes according to his plan, then the only thing left is to make me hated." Catherine seemed to understand and hurriedly reminded him, "Your Majesty, you cannot oppose the Chancellor's wishes." Julian's voice turned cold and thoughtful. "I'm not opposing it. In any case, we do need an Empress's palace." He raised his chin proudly and smirked. Looking back at her by the door, he ordered, "Catherine, prepare Sazin for tomorrow's banquet." Catherine was momentarily confused. "Do you intend to use her for another purpose, Your Majesty?" In the middle of the night, the full moon shone brilliantly. Meanwhile, Sazin was happily running as fast as she could. "Not now, but..." Julian smiled as he looked through the gap in the window. "I'm very much looking forward to seeing the Chancellor's face tomorrow." He then seriously asked about the progress. "Have you cleared away everything around Sazin?" Catherine respectfully reported, "Yes. All the servants and slaves who knew her have been transferred elsewhere, but she was summoned into the palace many times over the last 3 years. Only a few people know that, but it seems the Chancellor has noticed by accident." Bowing to His Majesty, she accepted his decision. "Very well. I've done my best to arrange everything appropriately, so that should be enough." Catherine's eyes suddenly shifted sideways. Testing the waters, she asked. At this hour, she should have gone to sleep already. "Where's Sazin?" Julian answered without much thought. "She said she was going somewhere for a bit." Catherine's head began to ache, and she sighed. "She's gone to see that person again. I already told her she needed to be careful about every single thing she does." Her words made him pause. "That person?" Sazin was hurrying off to find Bakon. "Yes, the person who can't live without Sazin." Sazin quickly pushed open the door. "Bakon, it's me." There was no one in the bed, and she stared in confusion. Why is it empty? Isn't this supposed to be resting time? And I don't see any other servants either." She fell into thought. "Come to think of it, I didn't see anyone on the way here either." Suddenly, someone came in from outside and asked in puzzlement, "Who are you?" Startled, Sazin turned and looked the newcomer over in astonishment. This person isn't a slave. Why is there a commoner here? Politely but anxiously, she asked, where did all the slaves who used to work here go? The person replied, the slaves? I heard they were all sent to the labor camp. She jolted in horror, her heart nearly stopping. What? The man explained, maybe they committed some serious offense against His Majesty, so they were dragged off to the labor camp. In her mind, images of people being beaten at the camp surfaced. Still stunned and distressed, she thought, a labor camp? That place where people are beaten every day and worked to death? Why? Why would Bakhan be there? Sazin suddenly went pale. All slaves belong to His Majesty. A blurry image of a bloodied sword rushed back in her mind. No, why would he do that? His earlier threats echoed in her ears. Things like, if you betray me, and if you do not fulfill the duties and work stated in the contract. An image of Julian holding Bakhan's slave document surfaced in her mind. I will kill this slave. The memory made her scream inwardly. I did do well. I never betrayed him. Sazin felt as if she had fallen into a bottomless abyss, horrified and shattered. No, there must be some misunderstanding. There's no way His Majesty would do something like that without telling me. Thinking back over the recent days, she tried to reassure herself. His Majesty is someone capable of compassion. He was worried about me today, too. Dragging herself away, she muttered, I have to trust him. I'm His Majesty's servant. I have to be loyal. Julian's image kept flickering through Sazin's mind, forcing her to keep strengthening that belief. Trust him. His Majesty is not that kind of person. Then another memory resurfaced. Their first meeting, under the moonlight, Julian in blood-soaked armor, glancing at her with contempt, running away like a rat. Then came the moment he had coldly interrogated her. It depends on whether you tell the truth. Your younger sister may live or become food for the lion. At his command, the lion had immediately lunged, ready to devour the plump prey before it. Bakhan. Bakhan's eyes had been wide with panic, worry, and fear, while Julian sat on the throne and watched at ease. Recalling that moment, she questioned herself in confusion. How am I supposed to trust him? Her hands trembled, sweat pouring from her, as if she had been drenched. And yet she had still indulged in foolish fantasies. At last I've escaped the life of a slave. Now I can even receive 1,000 rang a month. I'm so happy. The golden bracelet, symbolizing Sazin's pact with Julian, was ripped off and thrown away. Sazin completely broke down. She collapsed to the ground and blamed herself. I should have cared about Bakhan's safety above everything else. I should have begged for Bakhan's life first. Memories drifted back of when she and Bakhan were children, walking along the shore. Without Bakhan, everything is meaningless. We've been together since we were little. Sazin's eyes were soaked with tears as she sobbed. It's my fault. I am sorry, Bakhan. Bakhan. She burst into hopeless crying. Bakhan, what am I supposed to do? Then suddenly, someone slowly approached from behind and called out in puzzlement, Sazin. It was Julian. The moment she saw him, she stared in shock. Your Majesty. She immediately staggered toward him. Not understanding, he reminded her, why are you lying on the ground? It's filthy, pitiful, and small. Sazin clutched at his clothes. Her eyes shimmered, tears streaming down her cheeks as she asked with a trembling frown, Your Majesty, that isn't true, right? You didn't kill Bakhan, did you? Julian flinched in alarm when he saw her crying. His heart ached, but on the outside he forced himself to look angry and scolded, greedy thing. He turned and walked away, irritably calling for her to follow. Anyway, come with me. Scene change. In a training room, a place full of armor and all kinds of military training equipment. It was an elite training hall. From above, Sazin looked around blankly, taking it all in. This is a training ground far from the main palace. I came here once to clean. Turning his head to look down, he ordered, look. She obediently did as he said. Yes. The moment she looked, she recognized her at once. Bakhan. Julian frowned and explained coolly. They are cavalry, people who wear armor and serve under my command, living weapons. That slave will be trained the same way. Sazin stared in astonishment. Seeing how easily Bakhan got along with everyone, she gradually understood. Bakhan is speaking with those knights as their equal. Bakhan wasn't brought here to serve. The story about the labor camp was just a lie. His Majesty created this place for Bakhan. Sazin turned to him with bright, tear-filled eyes full of gratitude. Thank you, Your Majesty. He stood there in silence, looking at her. Then Julian suddenly reached his hand towards Seizen's face. He absently toyed with her ear and murmured, "What a nuisance." Memories of their first meeting came alive in him. Back then, Seizen had boldly declared, "Your Majesty, you can't properly wield your sword in the dark, can you? I will definitely help you stop being afraid of the darkness ever again." We had to do everything necessary to survive in this palace. At the time, Catherine had been wary and unconvinced. That slave dared boast that she had cured your Majesty's insomnia? Don't worry, I'll stand watch through the night and see whether she can really make your Majesty sleep. And one thing was certain, absolute trust did not exist. And yet, unexpectedly, the morning he woke feeling refreshed was the first night Julian had slept so well. Only then did Catherine admit it, though she still smiled warily. "I'm glad it worked, but I'm rather concerned that your Majesty spent the entire night with that person." Julian had asked softly, "Do you think she would do something evil?" Catherine gave an awkward smile. "No, not that." Then she added gently, "But she's a slave, after all. You know that." But the only thing filling his mind then had been Seizen's image. Her warm eyes, her bright encouragement. "Your Majesty, I'll do my best to help you feel at ease. So just relax and don't worry." How happy and comfortable that made Julian feel. At that time, Seizen had even said with proud conviction, "I'm your Majesty's only maid." We already made a blood oath, didn't we? "If your Majesty is ever in danger, I'll save you." But the housekeeper had already warned him about that. She had feelings for someone even before she was sold into the imperial palace. Julian's gaze turned cold and silent. Irritated and angry, he thought that should not be so. Returning to the present as he looked at Seizen before him, he thought how foolish it was to keep clinging to a piece of a heart she had already given away long ago. It was like a chain binding him fast. People should move forward. I only need to make that clear. Julian steadied himself, reminded himself of that, then declared seriously, "You are always my priority." Holding her hand and tenderly lifting a lock of her hair, he asked with restrained irritation, "Why must you keep caring so much about that woman?" She was bewildered. "Why is he so upset?" Seizen hesitated, then tried to explain. "Like I said, Bakon is—" He interrupted softly, "I can turn scrap iron into a sharp blade whenever I wish. But remember, the reverse can happen as well." Julian's words carried a warning. "So you need to understand the situation clearly. You should know where your attention belongs, and you must know what should come first above all else." Slowly withdrawing his hand, he warned her, "Don't forget, everything you long for and desire belongs to me." Scene shifts to Seizen, standing there blankly, staring at the empty surroundings as she thought. She remembered someone's warning. Scrap iron can be made into a sharp sword, and a sharp sword can be turned back into scrap iron. With a stiff expression, Seizen said, "Does this mean I need to focus more on the contract?" Her eyes dimmed sadly as she drifted into thought, remembering how Bakon had been seen as a distraction in His Majesty's eyes. "But I can't imagine life without Bakon by my side. Doesn't His Highness have anyone like that? Or is it because of his noble royal blood? Is he really so different that he can't understand? I told you, you're not allowed. This is the main palace, after all. Everything here will belong to His Majesty in the end, even your flesh and bones. Even burning everything away would not be enough. When will you finally realize that?" Seizen stood still, her back motionless. She did not turn away and continued thinking. Perhaps this was what the housekeeper meant to tell her. If you want to survive in the royal family, you must never reveal your emotions. Seizen sadly lowered her eyes. "How should I act? I feel so suffocated, like there's a stone lodged in my chest. Am I the only one who has to endure this?" While she was lost in thought, a familiar figure came up the stairs behind her and called out, "Seizen? Is that Seizen?" The moment she heard that voice, she turned around. Seeing Bakon frozen behind her, she immediately cried out her name. "Bakon!" She ran over and threw herself into Bakon's arms, crying out in a choked voice, "Bakon, I missed you so much." After standing there in a daze for a moment, Bakon came to her senses and replied brightly, "Good heavens, I thought a goddess from the southern island had descended. So it's you, Seizen." Hearing such praise, Seizen smiled and returned the compliment. "Bakon, you've gotten even cooler. She reached up as if to touch Bakon's face, her eyes never leaving it as she said, I think your shoulders are broader now, and you've gotten taller too. At the compliment, Bakon blushed and awkwardly scratched the back of her head, murmuring vaguely, really? Looking at her, Sazin thought to herself that the life of a cavalry soldier suited Bakon well. It had been a long time since she had seen her smile so brightly. Only then did Bakon seem to notice something, and she asked in surprise, I was so worried about you. Where had you been all this time? Sazin calmly replied, They made me His Majesty's servant. The moment she finished speaking, Bakon shouted, What? Sazin cheerfully told her about her work. My job is to cure His Majesty's insomnia and stop evil people from using black magic. My monthly pay is 1,000 krang too. Hearing that, Bakon looked at her with sparkling eyes, full of admiration. Sazin went on to explain her goal, not noticing Bakon's stunned expression. Once His Majesty's insomnia is cured and I get to meet the Empress, I'll be free. Bakon, wait until then, okay. Bakon smiled softly, her eyes narrowing. She gently touched Sazin's cheek and said in a soft voice, Don't worry, Sazin. I really like my life now, too. She told her, His Majesty praised me for fighting without losing my footing when I was attacked by a lion. I never expected it, but this feels like a good opportunity for me. I'm grateful that His Majesty gave me this chance. Looking at Sazin with gentle eyes, Bakon continued, I'm going to work hard and become one of His Majesty's cavalry. I want to do that. Sazin stared at her in surprise, thinking Bakon. Even though Bakon had a cheerful personality, there was always a trace of sorrow on one side of her face. Maybe that was why she always acted as though everything was fine. In the past, she had seemed far more inadequate than me. But in truth, she had more passion than anyone. When I was first dragged before His Majesty, I felt confused and resentful. But now I feel grateful. For 3 whole years, I couldn't find a place for myself in that pile of horse dung. But now hope has finally blossomed. Her cheeks flushed red as she asked Bakon in a slightly upset voice, Bakon, aren't you worried at all? I'm staying close to His Majesty. Hearing that, Bakon immediately understood what she meant. Gently stroking her cheek, she said, I trust you more than I trust myself. Besides, I'm more worried that you'll get hurt using magic. At those words, Sazin beamed and thought to herself, Bakon, there will never be anyone who trusts and loves me the way you do. She said sweetly, Bakon, do you still remember our promise? We said we'd get married when we returned to the island. But before that, we have to accomplish something truly amazing, something that will astonish His Majesty. Then we can ask His Majesty to let us marry. Hearing that, Bakon shyly lowered her eyes. The two of them held hands, and Sazin continued, So you have to train hard for my sake, and I'll do the same. Scene change. Somewhere else, someone was walking along carrying coffee in a red thread. It was Sazin. As she walked, she thought His Majesty's words may have sounded harsh, but they were true. He seemed deeply shocked before he explained everything. I have to make it clear, too, that I'm not some slave being tossed around from place to place anymore. The only thing I am here is a loyal servant, someone who always worries about His Majesty's health. She smiled brightly and thought with confidence, I have to complete this mission no matter what. She opened the door. Inside, Julian was sitting back in his chair at ease. She bowed and said, Your Majesty. Hearing her voice, he turned toward the door to look at her. Sazin approached with a bright spring-like smile and said, This is a medicine to ease your insomnia. Julian said nothing and stared into the cup with dark suspicion. Is this really medicine? It looks more like watered-down horse manure. He glanced at her radiant face and hesitated, unable to bring himself to drink it. Seeing that, Sazin felt a little irritated inside. Magic is only temporary, after all. After a while, Julian finally raised it to his lips and drank. The instant he swallowed it, his eyes flew open as he realized something. Sazin gave a cheerful little smile, as if everything had gone exactly according to plan. Your Majesty was right. Ugly things are ugly no matter what. As she watched Julian force himself to drink the medicine, an image flashed through her mind of the cup being splashed in his face. Inwardly, she grumbled at him. You threaten people, you create such a frightening atmosphere. You hid Bakon from me, and you've given me such a headache. Her eyes gleamed as she thought of what would happen next. I used herbs that are good for the body, but unfortunately, they're extremely bitter. Sazin glanced at him and said, It seems the medicine is a little bitter, doesn't it? Julian's face had gone pale. yet he still denied it. Not really. Covering her mouth with one hand, Sazin smiled and explained, "Oh my, really? I added a beneficial herb called agabi. They say it's very good for your health when you drink it." Julian's expression darkened at those words, and he cursed inwardly. "What kind of weed is that?" Sazin added, "Would you like some honey?" Julian immediately snapped at her. "You really are vicious." Sazin paid no attention to that. She picked up the red thread from earlier and said, "Then starting today, I'll begin testing this magic." As she tied it onto his hand, she explained, "I'll tie this end around your wrist, and this end I'll tie around your ankle." She lifted the red thread. "And this is it." She leaned close and whispered, "Now I'm going to try it, so please just lie down comfortably." Julian pretended to obediently do as he was told, but when she wasn't looking, he stole glances at her as she tied the string. He watched her back as she chanted the spell, and it reminded him of that morning when Sazin had run to another woman and called out her name. Without realizing it, he wanted to reach out his hand, but he suddenly stopped, then clenched his hand into a fist. A sly smile curled faintly on his lips. Then he slowly closed his eyes. Elsewhere, under the starry night, a man holding the office of Chancellor, Chancellor Elbert, stood by the window and quietly said to someone, "The banquet is tomorrow. It's been a long time since I've felt this excited." Elbert turned toward the figure behind him and asked, "Did you receive the dress? You absolutely must stand out before the elders, understand?" The young woman immediately replied, "Yes, father." He lightly tapped the window railing and muttered to himself. He fell on a battlefield, ran away, and left the army behind. I wonder whether anything has changed. And yet he truly keeps a mere slave by his side. Turning back with calculation in his eyes, he warned, "I can guarantee that this time I will crush him. Don't you dare make a mistake." The young woman bowed respectfully and replied, "Yes, father," with a proud bearing that could enchant thousands, hair more golden than the sun itself. Julian stood there carrying all the dignity and warmth of an emperor. His sharp, cold face seemed a little gentler today than before. Colin rubbed his chin as he approached, his tone full of admiration. "Oh, Your Majesty, I almost didn't recognize you." Still wearing an indifferent expression, Julian shot Colin a look of disgust. "Stop looking at me with such a revolting expression." "Oh, is that how you respond to a compliment? I've always looked at Your Majesty with gentle, affectionate eyes ever since we were children." Colin slowly stepped closer, shamelessly sweet-talking him. As if, Julian curled his lips into a faint smile. He knew Colin far too well. Colin crossed his arms and looked at the emperor with a mischievous smile playing on his lips. He observed carefully, "You've changed since that servant started staying by your side. A few months ago, you were like the grim reaper hunting people down, but now you look more alive. In any case, a man ought to keep women around him, shouldn't he? A man is only perfect when he has a woman by his side." Colin puckered his lips as he teased him. Thoughts began stirring in Julian's mind. "He's misunderstanding my relationship with Sazin. Why would I get close to that woman? Every night An image of Sazin suddenly appeared in his mind, gloomy and persistent. It hurts there, Your Majesty. Why won't you answer me? It hurts, right? A tale of breathtaking beauty with a hellish catastrophe for an ending. But if I tell him, he'll tease me for the next 10 years. I mustn't accidentally kill him." Julian thought furiously. At last, he sharply refuted him. "You're talking nonsense. I already told you. Closely monitoring the soldier's health is the duty of commander." Seeing the emperor grow angry, Colin immediately changed the subject. "I heard Miss Elbert will be attending the banquet tonight. I just hope she isn't like her father." What a smooth turn. When Julian heard that, his anger instantly vanished. Turning to Colin, he asked, "What is our little duke doing over on Elbert's side?" Fortunately, Colin was quick-witted and quietly sighed in relief. "It seems to be part of a secret plan previously arranged for the young lady. Elbert appears to have deliberately concealed her lowly origins." Resting his chin on his hand, Colin speculated for a moment before clicking his tongue. "Well, this is all so sudden that rumors she's an illegitimate daughter were unavoidable." Julian grew thoughtful and came to a conclusion. He must have chosen her because he needs her. Colin asked, "Do you really intend to marry the princess? Don't you have any other option?" Julian answered bluntly. "No," Colin continued the emperor's thought. "But isn't Elbert's scheme completely obvious? If his daughter gives birth to a son, he'll try to seize the throne by claiming he has a grandson. The political world still hasn't fully taken Your Majesty's side. And you think I don't know that?" Before Colin could finish, Julian cut him off with a defiant smile. Colin hesitated. "Well, I understand the idea. After countless battles, I've never stopped being amazed by Julian's skill and talent in combat. Come to think of it, during the war, Julian, my old friend, became a master swordsman. However, thinking that far, Colin let out a breath, his tone suddenly full of excitement. I never imagined I could bring down that gigantic monster. Your Majesty, how did you even come up with that strategy? Setting fire all around it, as though drying out its blood, cutting off its food supply, and then, in the chaos, tying up each man's hands and feet before smashing them straight into the monster's head. Colin repeated Julian's tactics, his eyes glittering with admiration for the brilliant emperor. Even though it took a lot of time, it felt incredibly satisfying. Colin went on excitedly, but he suddenly froze under a powerful wave of killing intent. In response, Julian answered coldly, his gaze dark enough to be frightening. I learned it from the Chancellor. Colin lowered his voice and protested. I only said that out of subject's duty. He clicked his tongue in irritation and stopped pressing the matter. TCH, this really is a mess. Julian reminded him sternly. You can't keep running forever. Running away is not a solution. As long as I keep the enemy by my side, that man will have brought death upon himself. With that, Emperor Julian turned and walked away, not forgetting to leave his knight with a meaningful warning. That evening, the banquet hall was illuminated by countless shimmering lights. The guests could not help marveling at the palace's magnificent beauty. Someone exclaimed, "My, it's beautiful." Another said, "It seems the Chancellor did put some thought into it." Someone else added, "This banquet is for His Majesty, who suffered so much in the war." Suffered? Well, I suppose you could call it that. One person said mockingly, and another burst out laughing. Ha ha ha! Did anyone hear that? Whispers and gossip rose all around them. One young woman turned to the woman beside her and said, I wonder whether he came to his senses after seeing that monster. Wouldn't be surprising if he went mad for no reason again tonight, just like always. The other agreed, leaning in a whisper, That's right, everyone should be careful. There was once a young girl whose face was nearly ruined. Who was she again? Someone else asked. Another person said, Honestly, I didn't want to come here at all. It's only because Chancellor Elbert is hosting this banquet. I will manage everything perfectly. Elbert nodded. Yes, my lord. Just then, an announcement came from outside. His Majesty's attendant has arrived. A mysterious smile appeared on the Chancellor's lips. Slow footsteps echoed from outside the doors. No matter how I think about it, isn't this too much? Not even the wife of the Southern Islands chief would dare dress like this. As she walked, Sazin drifted through those thoughts. Unlike usual, she was now wearing an outfit with elegant, revealing cuts, and the careful makeup on her face only highlighted her natural beauty. Appearing in such a polished look made Sazin feel a little strange. This seems far too extravagant for a servant. Catherine, who had been walking ahead, noticed her falling behind and turned back to call, Come along. Sazin hurriedly replied, Yes. Catherine carefully instructed her, Remember to do this properly. From the moment you step into the banquet hall, you are His Majesty's lady. Those words startled Sazin into confusion. His lady? She stood there blankly for a few seconds. Then is my face being painted up like a bridesmaid's? No, you will be the woman His Majesty treasures. Catherine repeated herself once more. What? Sazin cried in bewilderment. What do you think your role at this banquet is? Catherine asked seriously. Sazin thought for a moment, then answered hesitantly, to stay by His Majesty's side. Catherine looked dissatisfied. Not enough, she said. Any forces that threaten your position must be kept under control. At that, Sazin panicked. What, you want me to fight with those nobles in a single month? I've only been here for 1 month. How could I possibly take on the foremost position that even His Majesty himself has not yet fully secured? In contrast to Sazin's alarm, Catherine said calmly, There is only one thing you need to concern yourself with. Suddenly, Catherine stepped forward, seized Sazin by the shoulders, and asked, Do you know that His Majesty was once falsely accused of killing the former Empress? The action stunned Sazin for a moment, and she nodded slightly. Yes, His Majesty already told me. Catherine continued, The nobles believe His Majesty despises women. They believe he went mad because he hated his mother, who abandoned him when he was young. The only thing that grants him legitimacy is his royal blood. Very few nobles believe that His Majesty, who goes mad at the sight of women and always draws his sword, is worthy of the throne. No one, not a single person, has imagined that Chancellor Elbert, the man entrusted with caring for the mad emperor, has instead abused and exploited him. Against the young emperor, he used black magic and drugs. At a time like this, if his daughter becomes Empress, all power will gather into his hands, and his majesty will immediately become a puppet. He will remain in control until the day his daughter gives birth to a prince. Catherine's voice grew heavier than ever before. So show me, Catherine said firmly, now that his majesty has returned to normal and no longer hates women. At the same time, she tightened her grip on Sazon's arm. No ray of sunlight must touch any woman. Keep it all under your control. Sazon, show everything you have, as if you are truly his majesty's weapon, so convincingly that even his majesty himself is deceived. Catherine's words left Sazon stunned. Her eyes widened as if she could not believe what she had just heard. As Julian was lifting a glass of red wine, someone suddenly approached and greeted him respectfully. Your Majesty, I am delighted to see you. A man with neatly combed brown hair and a gentle-looking face stepped forward and spoke cheerfully. Now that the war is over, it would be wonderful if your Majesty could enjoy a few new amusements. How would you feel about going hunting? Before Julian could reply, Albert suddenly cut in. How could he possibly go hunting? His Majesty is very busy these days. The other man looked surprised. Oh, is that so? Albert turned to Julian, a cordial smile curling on his lips. Your Majesty, I heard you were training the cavalry. Julian answered him blandly. It is only for amusement. My cavalrymen are still little more than children. Does the Chancellor not also have a few very famous cavalrymen? Though he said it lightly, Julian understood better than anyone what was happening behind his back. A few cavalrymen? The man was even forming a private army capable of rivaling the imperial forces. How about an occasional match? Albert suggested with feigned goodwill. A match between the Emperor's cavalry and the Chancellor's? Julian sounded curious. Yes. Julian accepted calmly. Of course. I think it will be a very good opportunity to learn something. Seeing that, Albert smiled in satisfaction. Certainly, Your Majesty. I will train them well. On the surface, the two seemed as close as father and son, yet a few imperial nobles were sharp enough to notice Albert's vile attitude. Inwardly, they became wary of the hypocritical Chancellor. Good heavens, the Chancellor cannot even be bothered to speak humbly. He treats his Majesty like a child. Who is the one who truly ought to remain here? On the other hand, many nobles saw nothing strange at all. Some even seemed to admire the relationship between Albert and Julian. Ha ha ha, they're still getting along so well, aren't they? You are right. They look even closer than my own son and I. The Chancellor has helped and cared for His Majesty so devotedly. His Majesty surely has nothing to worry about. Hearing the whispers among the nobles below, Colin quietly signaled the Emperor. Shall I deal with these lunatics? However, Julian merely took a calm sip of wine, signaling to the knight to keep a composed expression. Suddenly, the brown-haired man seemed to remember something and spoke up. Ah, that is right. There is a second main figure appearing at this banquet today, is there not? Albert nodded. That is correct, though she has not yet appeared. At that moment, the gatekeeper's voice rang throughout the palace. Lady Dina Stewart has arrived. Her appearance immediately stirred the crowd. Oh, she arrived at just the right moment. A graceful figure slowly emerged. Both Albert and the guests present at the banquet were left stunned. Above them, Colin and Julian could not hide their surprise either. He froze, eyes wide. Whispers rose all around, and Julian's gaze suddenly turned sharp as a blade. Is that the former Empress? People murmured as they saw Dina Stewart appear in a magnificent formal gown. What a surprise. I thought the former Empress had returned. Someone recognized the dress and exclaimed, "Oh, that gown looks exactly like one the former Empress loved to wear. The details are different, but the aura is very similar." Another person said, "Actually, she is the daughter recommended by the Chancellor. This young lady will be the next Empress of the Empire. It is an honor to meet Your Majesty, son of the Empire." Dina Stewart curtsied, her sweet voice sounding as flawless as her grand appearance. Privately, she praised herself smugly. Well done, Dina. The atmosphere among the nobles is perfect, and there was not a single mistake. I greeted him exactly the way Father told me to. At this rate, His Majesty will take my hand and lead me away. If I sit beside him. As Dina thought this, she unconsciously stretched out her hand. But contrary to the scene she had imagined, Julian suddenly tilted his wine glass to one side. The red liquid spilled out, soaking the chair beside him. His voice was calm, yet openly provocative. My hand slipped. "Remove that chair," Julian ordered, the Emperor's face darkening with menace. At once, the empty chair that had been placed right beside Julian was carried away. Watching Dina Stewart be coldly rejected by Julian, the guests began to grow suspicious. Is she not being made Empress? Normally they would sit together. I feel embarrassed just watching this. Hush, the Chancellor is still here. Watch your mouth. Standing nearby, Albert fell into thought. That idiot went and acted on her own again, doing something I never asked for. The girl only handed Julian an excuse to behave like this. I had better change the subject. After a moment's calculation, he spoke up first. Your Majesty, I heard a rumor I simply could not believe. I heard that you are keeping a slave by your side as a servant. Is that correct? Albert asked bluntly, without the slightest restraint. Julian was no easy opponent either. He raised an eyebrow at the Chancellor. And why is it that you cannot believe it? Albert put on an understanding expression. No, it is not that such a thing is inherently bad. I am only concerned that it may damage your Majesty's dignity. A slave whose work is cleaning horse dung, sitting beside your Majesty, the son of the Empire? As soon as the nobles heard that, they collectively lost themselves in outrage. Good heavens, there is actually a slave at his side? Please reconsider, your Majesty. This harms the honor of the Empire. The maids have dignity of their own to preserve. How could you dismiss them for a mere cleaner of horse dung? Julian sat there coldly, watching the crowd perform their own little drama. Look at them. They are becoming more and more frenzied. He killed every woman who came near him before. What happened to the female attendants? I suppose it is because he does not want to marry the Chancellor's daughter, and this is all part of building an image of power. Besides, he is still young. Oh, if everyone keeps criticizing him like this, he will only create another scandal. A silver-haired nobleman laughed inwardly as he watched Julian receive wave after wave of criticism. Despite the noble's attacks, Julian's face remained utterly expressionless. The atmosphere suddenly fell silent. Only then did Julian speak slowly. Why have you stopped? Go on. Say, please do not do that. Impossible. Resting his chin on his hand, he smirked as if he had seen through everything. I did not think you people wanted an explanation from the Emperor. Well, that is not. Julian's calm attitude made the nobles waver. What is this? This oppressive feeling. What a dull sort of explanation. Now that the war is over, I hope your Majesty will focus on producing an heir. Albert spoke pointedly as he pulled Dina Stewart toward him. You know, I have always chosen and brought only the best things for you. Do not stain your precious body any further. He forced a courteous smile. It is not that I do not understand your feelings. As Julian spoke, he beckoned to Colin. Colin took out a decree and announced in a ringing voice, Lady Dina Stewart is ordered to remain in the Imperial Palace for 100 days. After it has been determined that she meets all the qualifications to become Empress, her proper position will then be decided. Julian's declaration left Albert and Dina utterly shocked. The final decision regarding the Empress is the Emperor's sole authority. Were you not prepared to let someone else choose in your place? Albert lowered his head and accepted it. Thank you, Your Majesty, for your consideration. However, he still refused to stop. But Your Majesty, that slave. Before Albert could continue, a voice rang out from outside. Your Majesty. The person who appeared was Sazin. At the sight of her, the nobles exploded into chatter like a disturbed hive. Who is she? Damn it, is that not the clothing of foreigners? Then could that woman be the lowly slave who recently entered the palace? Sazin acted as though she heard nothing and faced the nobles with calm indifference. She recalled what Catherine had told her before bringing her here. As for the nobles, over the past 3 years, she had learned that one must not look directly into their eyes, because she had always been so terrified of them. But there was a useful way to deal with that. Imagine that their heads are horse heads. In an instant, the crowd before Sazin turned into countless horse heads. With that, she brightened and cupped her cheeks. Her confident steps carried her past the nobles who had once been the greatest terror of her life as a slave. How awful. Why did Your Majesty leave me all alone? Sazin is here now, Your Majesty. Right in front of all the nobles, Sazin leaped onto Julian and clung to him in a spoiled, coaxing manner. She casually raised her hands to hold Julian's handsome face, while he smiled at her affectionately. The sweet, intimate scene left the entire hall bewildered. The nobles immediately burst into discussion. Would he not normally become furious if a woman struck him like that? Has he recovered from the madness he had during the war? what a surprise. Such rare beauty. Her name. Could she be the daughter of some noble family from the south? Why is he not scolding her for behaving like that in public? He is not treating her like a slave at all, but like an empress. Oh, the Chancellor must be mortified. His Majesty did not even spare Lady Stuart a glance. The Chancellor will have much to think about now, after always giving His Majesty orders. Hearing those mocking remarks, Dina nervously stole a glance at him. Albert silently observed Sazin, wondering if she truly was the slave from the stables. Just a month ago, she had been no different from an insect crawling on the ground. So how could she now be this confident? She did not resemble someone who had once been a slave at all. And moreover, His Majesty's arm was wrapped around her. Could it be that the magic sent from Yulian before was no longer effective? Of course, I must get rid of her before she becomes an obstacle. After a brief calculation, Albert spoke with false politeness. Your Majesty, what a surprise. It seems you have picked up quite a remarkable white stone from the horse stable. She looks like an entirely different person dressed like this. Hearing that, Julian answered slowly, still holding Sazin close. You truly have not changed at all. Seeing Julian respond with such ease unsettled Albert. He had no intention of yielding, acting as if he were already the Emperor of Lagerdeck. Julian continued, Is that not exactly what the Chancellor taught me? Even a stone can become a sword if it is properly sharpened. Albert gave a stiff smile. Then perhaps I taught you poorly. How could a stone rolling out of a pile of horse dung ever become a pearl? Is that so? I had no idea the Chancellor would say such things. Yes? It seems the Chancellor does not know that even a seed, if it cannot remember which field it was sown in, cannot bear sweet fruit. Hearing Julian's firm words, Dina beside him broke into a cold sweat. If you feel as though you are already seated upon the throne, this is the vision of the Emperor, the son of the Empire, and I am not saying it is any worse than the Chancellor's. He let out a mocking laugh, speaking with pointed meaning. You are far too deluded, Albert. No one truly loyal to me would act this way. Realizing he had been caught out, the Chancellor's face darkened, and he ground his teeth as he cursed inwardly. You bastard. Sazin trudged down the palace corridor. She looked somewhat dazed. It is finally over. Sazin raised a hand to her face, panic filling her eyes. We tried every possible method. Did any of it even work? I even sat on the Emperor's lap. I have lost my mind. You have lost your mind, Sazin. She recalled Julian's expression then and guessed silently that he had looked completely bewildered. His Majesty must have been very surprised. Sazin's point of view. Now Sazin was full of regret as she remembered sitting on Julian's lap. How could you behave like that in a situation like that? In the end, she had fled first in embarrassment. You look tired. Get some rest first. Leaning back against the wall behind her, she sighed. I do not even like lying like this. I only want to focus on doing my work as a servant. Suddenly, she remembered Albert's frightening eyes and mocking words from earlier. He was even scarier than I expected. How could a stone picked up from a horse stable be polished into a pearl? Sazin's mood instantly grew heavy. Although people said the Chancellor had a very friendly face, his eyes were sharp as though he were holding a sword. Albert always appeared draped in the cloak of friendliness. And the nobles believed what they saw. Many nobles agreed with him, and every one of them had influence. I cannot believe I have to stand against people like that. Sazin got to her feet just as a voice approached. Right, of course. Actually, I do not know how far everyone's discussion has gone. Two elegant figures slowly came into view from the distance, and Sazin suddenly recognized a familiar face. Lady Dina Stuart. She remembered Catherine's words and shifted her gaze thoughtfully. The political marriage between the Emperor and the young lady will take place, and then that person will become Empress. Sazin grew excited. I am sorry, Your Majesty, but honestly, when I think about being freed soon, I feel very happy. Dina walked elegantly ahead with her maid. Meanwhile, Sazin remained lost in thought. Because the Emperor can only return to the southern island if he marries the young lady, unlike that seemingly loyal Chancellor. Her head throbbed from her private thoughts, and she helplessly held it. But she looks so miserable. She will probably think I am the Emperor's lover. I cannot say that I do not want marriage, and I cannot reveal the Emperor's plan either. Sazin tried to stay calm as she walked. Just stay calm and walk past them. Her future husband will explain things to her. She stopped before Dina, lightly placed a hand over her chest, and began introducing herself. Sazin greets you, my lady. Awkwardly, she looked at the lady beside her and tried to remember. Who is that? I did not see her in the hall. Receiving no reply, Sazin awkwardly gestured in another direction. Then I shall take my leave, and my lady as well. Before she could finish speaking, Janice struck Sazin with a resounding slap. The blow caught her completely off guard. Sazin lifted bewildered eyes and looked forward. Janice angrily demanded, "Do you not even know the most basic etiquette?" Sazin looked at Dina's calm face, filled with confusion. She had her maid slap me? With that face, struggling to suppress her anger, she touched the cheek that had just been struck and thought as she spoke, "No, you slapped me without saying a word? I did not expect this at all. If you had simply said it, I would have understood." Janice furiously raised her hand to strike again, but at that very moment, a voice stopped her. "Oh dear, do not answer like that." Then Dina spoke in warning. "That is enough." A turn. She turned her head, speaking in the manner of a little cat. "But my lady, this little wretch dared to speak back to you. In this palace, servants are not even allowed to raise their heads until a noble permits it." Sazin frowned, silently protesting. "So you think slapping someone is acceptable?" Dina spoke in a mocking tone. "A slave who cleans horse dung does not know the rules of the palace. Did you come from a southern island?" Sazin nodded seriously. "Yes, that is correct." Dina lifted her eyes, then slowly lowered them as she gave Sazin a once-over. With a sneer, she pointed at Sazin's exposed midriff. "The women there really have no decency, do they? Walking around with nothing but a few scraps of cloth on." Unable to swallow the insult, Sazin raised her voice and explained, "I understand that you are unfamiliar with the southern island. The weather there is warmer than it is here, and the main occupation is trading raw materials. So people there usually wear lighter, more breathable clothing." Dina covered her mouth with her hand. "So that means she's practically wearing nothing." Sazin went rigid at those deeply insulting words. It was no different from calling her one of the whores in a brothel. A stream of reasoning surged up from deep within her heart. "I know you hate me, and so do the people in this palace. I'm not used to the clothing of the southern island either, but to judge the traditions of another country like this." Her pride had been struck. Dina and Janice could not suppress their satisfied smiles. Could someone about to become Empress really say things like this? Sazin clenched her hand as she thought and spoke. "I feel sorry for the Emperor, having to take someone like you as his partner and the mother of this nation." Then she coldly added, "My lady." Dina immediately took offense. "You should call me Empress. I'm not as nasty as you think." Then, with a bright smile, she offered a false apology. "I am sorry. I went too far." Sazin curled her lip. "Is that so? You truly are very humble." "What do you mean by that? Don't you remember? Haven't you had your eye on His Majesty for a very long time?" Those words made Dina recall the sight of Sazin sitting quietly in Julian's lap, surrounded by all the Emperor's wealth. She stammered in protest. "I've never seen anyone like you." But then Sazin brightly added, "Humility should begin with the smallest things. All the people of the Empire will surely feel that from the bottom of their hearts." Sazin's words startled Dina, and Janice beside her raised her hand high, ready to strike. "Why, you really are insane. I ought to beat you to death." At that moment, a powerful voice rang out, making Janice freeze. "What is all this noise?" Housekeeper Catherine approached coldly with two knights. The housekeeper cast her frigid gaze over them. Janice's raised arm and the pitiful redness on Sazin's cheek both fell within her sight. Catherine pointed forward and ordered, "Take away the troublemaker." The woman jolted in shock. Me?" One of the knights stepped forward. Dina stepped in front and held out her arm, brazenly protecting Janice. "This girl is my personal maid. Leave at once." The two knights glanced at her. Then they ignored her completely and continued toward Janice. Being brushed aside, Dina stared blankly after their backs. The two knights seized Janice firmly while she furiously shouted at Catherine, "Let me go, your majesty." Dina angrily demanded, "Housekeeper, what kind of rude behavior is this?" "This is the Empress's order. Tell the knights to stop." Faced with Dina's insolence, Catherine remained composed. "You have not yet become Empress. Please conduct yourself with dignity, Miss Stewart. It is still far too early for you to say whatever you please." Crossing her arms, Dina sneered, Then I suppose I should call you Baroness." Dina spoke in a threatening tone, Yet Catherine showed no fear and instead mocked her. I am the Chancellor's daughter and will soon become Empress. Aren't you afraid of the consequences later? Catherine brushed past her and said, I heard you underwent 3 months of etiquette training to prepare to become Empress. It seems the Chancellor thought too highly of you. Apparently that much time was not enough for you to understand all the laws of the palace. What? To harm a woman favored by the Emperor is treason. It can be punished by hanging. Janice's face instantly turned pale with panic. Changing. Catherine lifted Seizen's chin so Dina could clearly see the red mark on her cheek. You should know this well. The person who receives the Emperor's favor holds the highest authority. Then Catherine suddenly turned and asked, Is the injury severe? Seizen smiled and deliberately emphasized her answer. Only a little. The inside of my mouth is torn and it bled a little. She added a few more words, like pouring oil onto the fire, making Dina and Janice panic even more. My gums are throbbing, and one of my teeth seems discolored, but it's fine. Catherine glanced at them. That sounds quite serious. Trembling, Janice cried out to Dina for help. Oh, Your Majesty! But unable to help Janice any further, Dina abruptly turned away. Catherine immediately gave the order. Take away the one who attacked the Emperor's guest. Night fell, and the gentle moonlight spread softly across the palace. Carrying a glass of water, Seizen walked thoughtfully down the corridor. Are they really going to hang that maid? The housekeeper told me not to worry and to focus on my own affairs. I really am angry, but more than that, I just feel uneasy. Seizen still felt dazed. To lose one's life over a single slap. Sorrow flickered in her eyes. The status I received from the Emperor is certainly useful. When I was a slave, people beat me and nothing changed at all. Then Seizen stopped in front of her room. Your Majesty, it's Seizen. Gomein. Having received permission, she opened the door and stepped inside. Julian glanced at Seizen. He seemed to be in the middle of changing clothes. Wait a moment. Chapter 14. Wait a moment. Julian had been changing when he suddenly heard that familiar voice. Seizen entered carrying a tray of clothes and hesitated. Shall I help you change, Your Majesty? She asked gently. No need. Julian refused softly, then casually removed his outer robe in front of Seizen, as if the two of them were already used to exposing their bodies to one another. Suddenly noticing something, Julian turned to Seizen and asked, Why is your cheek red? Caught off guard, Seizen gave a slight start. That. Remembering the clash between herself and Miss Stewart, and the things Dina had said about her, that she was a slave who used to play with horse dung, Seizen awkwardly grabbed at the first excuse she could think of to explain the mark on her cheek. I was in a hurry and fell down. As she looked at the Emperor's noble bearing, Seizen idly thought, no matter what, the Emperor is an aristocrat. He probably thinks the same way that lady does. Something like this could never delay their marriage. Even so, as a servant, I'm a little concerned. With that thought, she gathered up all her courage and asked, Your Majesty, what do you think of Miss Stewart? Julian seemed slightly surprised by Seizen's question and asked in return, What do you mean? I only need her as part of a political maneuver. There is no benefit in caring about someone like that. But having a good person beside you would make you happier, and that would help with your sleep, Seizen said innocently, with a sincere smile. Then I'll be able to leave happily too. After saying that, Seizen delivered a final remark that made Julian freeze for a moment. He stepped toward her, his tone as though he were suppressing something. What are you talking about? Not understanding the situation, Seizen innocently replied, I didn't say anything strange. Besides, she doesn't know I'm only acting. I'm just worried that the young lady might misunderstand the two of us. That could cause trouble. Seizen kept explaining, deeply afraid that she might make things worse. I don't think Miss Stewart is the sort of person who would quietly let this pass. And what am I supposed to do for you? Julian asked suddenly. I'll explain it to you later, Julian said in a low voice. The distance between them became closer than ever. Seizen looked somewhat flustered. Explain it? You mean explain to the young lady? Then, Julian said through gritted teeth, reaching out and gripping Seizen's shoulders tightly. If that is truly how you feel from the bottom of your heart, then you must stay by my side until the very end. The Emperor stressed every word, each one sounding both like an order and something more. Seizen stared at Julian with wide eyes and let out a bewildered, You said you would be loyal to me, and yet you too are just a slave trying to run away from me, Julian said angrily, his face instantly turning utterly cold. Faced with the Emperor's rage, fear shone in Seizen's eyes. In a small voice, lowering her head and not daring to look directly into Julian's eyes, she said, I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I won't say such things carelessly again. As soon as Sazin finished speaking, Julian released her shoulders. Then he turned away and left, saying flatly, I won't need your spell tonight. Hearing that, Sazin was startled and timidly called after him, but Your Majesty. However, Julian seemed unwilling to hear anymore. He coldly cut her off and said, Go. Is this bottle for one person? Sazin asked when she saw the tray, with a liquor bottle neatly placed on the table. It lets me sleep well for 2 or 3 hours, Julian answered. Standing beside him, Sazin immediately snatched the bottle from his hand and firmly stopped him. No, drinking alcohol like this will interfere with the medicine's effect. Julian let out an unconscious sigh. Sazin kept chattering while examining the bottle in her hand. This bottle doesn't even have a label. Your Majesty, how can you drink things like this? By then, Julian had already settled onto the bed. With his eyes half closed, he replied slowly, I drank it when fighting monsters. You still need sleep on the battlefield. Sazin smiled faintly. You won't need this anymore. Returning to the present, Sazin stood hidden behind the partition, gazing inside with sadness. On the shelf beside Julian's bed, the liquor bottle he used to rely on for his insomnia had appeared once again. He's suffering from sleeplessness again, Sazin thought painfully. He doesn't take anything I say to heart anymore. In his life, he may see marriage as a means of strengthening power or a political weapon. He feels uncomfortable when people speak of happiness. It's a forced marriage, all because of the Chancellor. I really am a fool. With endless thoughts circling in her mind, she sank down behind the partition in gloom. I have to help that heart to the very end. There's nothing else I can do. That is my duty. Sazin's eyes were heavy with worry. The bright days she had known rose before her, reminding her that she must not give up. Once her agreement with His Majesty was fulfilled, Bakon would be able to make a name for herself as a knight, and the two of them would return to the southern island together. Suddenly, a strange sound came from Julian's room, cutting off Sazin's train of thought. At that moment, Julian seemed to be trapped somewhere, with all the light around him turned dark and dim. His manner was urgent, as though searching for help, and confusion showed clearly on his sharp features. The space before him was deeply eerie. Mountain ridges stretched out endlessly, glowing a brilliant blood red. Julian reflected in silence, while exhaling labored breaths. How many days have I been walking? I am exhausted. Why am I trapped in this place? Where are the soldiers? Where's Colin? In the depth of the dark night, a sound like an explosion rang out. A mysterious voice rose from nowhere. In that place, the son of a tyrant is growing. Julian tightened his grip on the sacred sword in his hand, vaguely recognizing something. That voice, without any warning, a powerful force slammed straight into Julian, making him cry out in pain. Ah! Commander? Julian called in shock, but no one answered. He stood frozen before a pile of ashes as the mysterious voice continued. Again, in front of these ashes, that bloodline will live in solitude and wither away like some tiny creature. Suddenly, a stream of black energy shot out and tightened around Julian's throat like a noose. At his feet, countless more streams of black energy transformed one by one into cords that bound Julian fast. Julian struggled desperately, but the more he fought, the tighter that dark force constricted him. Damn it, the one in that bloodline who is called a witch. A curse born from the sacrifice of a life. At long last, like a witch reduced to ashes, a flame will blaze with the very end of this life. Something that will make you scream forever. Enduring unbearable agony with my own hands, I will endure this pain for your majesty. A voice rang out like millions of stars lighting up the dark night. The knife in Julian's hand suddenly vanished. The emperor gazed at the figure before him. At last he stepped forward and took the girl's hand, hesitating as he failed to speak. You. When he opened his eyes again, Julian saw a red thread around his wrist. He silently followed the direction in which it extended, beginning from his bed. Then it passed behind the partition and ended at someone's ankle. Julian carefully followed the red thread to the person it led to. A moment of reflection settled over the emperor. So the one who had helped Julian escape the nightmare was none other than Sazin. Looking at her sleeping deeply on the bed, Julian immediately understood everything. She had even interfered in my dream. Julian unconsciously stepped closer to Sazin, his fingers reaching toward her lovely face. Strands of hair had fallen over her forehead, and he wanted to brush them aside with his hand. Suddenly, Sazin's radiant smile, bright as countless stars, appeared before his eyes. Julian's hand instantly went rigid at what it had been about to do. It's raining. A rain that leaves me soaked, and I don't know what to do. That thought made Julian's cheeks suddenly flush. That night, rain was pouring down outside. Julian sat beside Sazin's bed for a long while, unable to stop thinking. Looking at the still red injury on her beautiful face, Julian could not keep himself from wondering who had struck her. He remembered the absurd story about falling on the ground and the lost look in Sazin's eyes when she fabricated an excuse for the mark on her face. Julian could only fall silent. She really went so far as to make up such a ridiculous story. Julian felt a little regretful. I should have listened to Catherine's report first. I'll hear it tomorrow, he thought quietly, then slowly rose to his feet. But Julian did not leave immediately. When he turned back for one last look, his attention caught on a small detail. It was the blanket lying discarded beside Sazin. Your sleeping habits. He quietly looked at Sazin, still fast asleep and utterly unaware. Then Julian gently pulled the blanket up to cover her. If you catch a cold, who will take care of me? He murmured. But he still felt the need to hedge it with a pointless explanation. I'm only doing this as a master who values his servant. While everyone continued to offer petty excuses, at Duke Stewart's estate, a harsh curse rang out louder than the sound of the night rain. You idiot! Dina trembled as she bowed her head to the floor, one hand clutching her cheek while a pained cry escaped her mouth. Ignoring his daughter's pitiful state, the man standing beside her continued to spit out vicious words. How many times have I told you? Julian, that bastard, hates his mother with a passion. I told you to be careful. Do you think I said that because I was afraid you'd lose your head? Anbeck shouted furiously. I even chose a dress that those old men would like. And yet you still chose to wear this one to bring back the image of the former Empress? Faced with her father's scolding, Dina Stewart could only tearfully say through sobs, I'm sorry, father. Then she crawled across the floor toward her father, her voice turning desperate. But people who lose their mother when they are young carry a deep longing inside them. As Dina Stewart spoke, scenes from the past rose before her eyes. Just like me 17 years ago, people live by clinging to the empty spaces in their hearts. Whether it's resentment or longing, if you could draw it out and point it out to them, it becomes even more powerful. Dina Stewart still could not understand. I practically used that as a tool to succeed. Wasn't this something that would benefit both me and the Emperor? Hearing his daughter's words, Anbeck showed his disgust openly. Who taught you that nonsense? Dina Stewart answered honestly, I read it in a book. A veritade. Anbeck mocked. In a rough motion, he grabbed her face with one hand and called her name in a threatening voice. Dina, human emotions are complicated. You can't just drag out someone's anger and then heal it, Anbeck said, each cold word striking against her ears. Happiness can turn into rage, love into hatred, and trust into suspicion. Don't believe those fairy tales meant for fools. People do not behave according to your naive fantasies. Besides, didn't I teach you that an empress must not act rashly? As soon as he finished speaking, Duke Stewart swung his arm and shoved Dina Stewart down brutally, making her cry out in pain and shock. Duke Stewart showed no sign of pity. He threw Dina Stewart a look of disgust and said, and yet today you behaved like a whore. Hearing that, Dina Stewart stared at him in astonishment. What? I heard you got into a quarrel and grabbed a guest by the hair. Because of that, my honor has been dragged through the mud, Duke Stewart said bitterly. Realizing she had acted impulsively, Dina Stewart hurriedly explained, I was only angry because His Majesty would not look at me. Father, if you can use magic to turn the Emperor's heart toward me, then from now on I will behave better. A scornful smile appeared at the corner of Duke Stewart's mouth. How stupid. If magic could make someone's heart belong to you, then the whole world would belong to witches. Then how can I win his heart? Dina Stewart blurted out. Then she awkwardly corrected herself. No, what I mean is from now on I'll be smarter. I won't make mistakes anymore. So please, Father, don't abandon me. Dina Stewart cried out in desperation, clinging to Duke Stewart's leg as if it were her only lifeline. That was right. Compared to the old days, being Miss Stewart was far better. She never wanted to go back to the laundry quarters in the slums. Of course, Duke Stewart suddenly said in a syrupy voice. You must bear Julian's child so that I can become regent king. But even if that did not happen, he added, he would never abandon her. To Dina Stewart, the Duke's words were like a life preserver. She lifted her head and looked at him with shining eyes, obediently calling out, Father. Unexpectedly, in answer to her affectionate call, Duke Stewart calmly declared in an icy voice, I will kill you. With that, he turned and left. Kneeling on the floor, Dina Stewart felt thoughts swelling inside her mind. Instead of relying on that, I should make a stronger spell. Maybe that slave is the reason the spell failed. Thanks to that, Julian has been living in peace all this time. Duke Stewart himself was also sunk in calculation. That's right, he must suffer both physically and mentally. Only then will he stop dreaming of rising above me. The plan was a resounding success, Colin announced cheerfully. Housekeeper Catherine slowly poured tea and gently reminded her son, Don't get so excited. Colin smiled with narrowed eyes. Oh, Mother, the entire atmosphere here has changed. Did you see the expressions on those nobles' faces? Watching them panic was so satisfying, and the eyes of those young kings lit right up. He described enthusiastically, his voice full of pride. Your Majesty, before long you will receive oaths of loyalty, someone said to Emperor Julian. He carefully set down his teacup and said, Sazin played an important role. Because of my madness, even the Emperor's supporters remained silent. But now their choice will change. Julian analyzed the situation. That's right. That notion that he becomes a raving lunatic whenever he sees a woman and needs court ministers to restrain him. That argument no longer applies, Collins said. Housekeeper Catherine followed her son's remark. If a woman like her appears, no one will believe that anymore. Contrary to our concerns, she is truly quite useful, both for her beauty and for her magical power. Catherine could not help but admit that Sazin had done far better than they had expected. So who laid hands on Sazin? Julian could not stop himself from seeking an answer to that question. Catherine reported, We have detained the maid of the Stewart young lady. At that, Julian was startled and asked, Which house does she belong to? She comes from Baron Eaton's family, an estate on the edge of the frontier. Unlike his predecessors, who always lived in obscurity, he is highly ambitious and wants to step into the center of politics. It seems he worked very hard to place his daughter as a maid to the future Empress, Catherine observed. Colin quickly cut in. Put simply, he's trying to curry favor with the Chancellor. Baron Eaton? Wasn't he granted permission to maintain a private army under the pretext of guarding the frontier? Julian asked. Colin scratched his head and nodded. That's right, and that force is made up entirely of Satic female warriors. They're extremely warlike. Thanks to them, the western border has never been breached. That must be why Duke Stewart allowed it. For a sycophant, he's no ordinary man. After thinking for a while, Colin suddenly exclaimed, Oh, right, now that you mention it, aren't we discussing something very important? Our precious Sazin was beaten badly. She even lost 2 teeth, and her gums were torn and bleeding nonstop. Those bastards deserve to die, Colin declared, raising his cup. A few days later, within House Eaton's territory, cannon fire was unleashed, shattering the stone wall. Seeing the soldiers standing frozen in place, a red-haired man angrily shouted, What is this? Why are you just standing there while cannon fire is raining down on us? Pale-faced, the soldier explained, My lord, teach that is the White Lion banner. This man was Baron Eaton. Hearing the soldier's words, he stared ahead in alarm. What did you say? The soldier trembled as he reported, His Majesty has personally led troops here. Colin carried over a box of belongings, looking puzzled. Should I take this whole chest too? Sazin nodded sincerely in reply. Yes, thank you for helping. And what human being lacks curiosity? Colin was no different. These are all Southern Island clothes. Aren't you going to wear them anymore? Hugging the pile of things in her arms, she slowly walked closer to him. The housekeeper has already given me many outfits. She quietly recalled certain memories. I may be confident, but the people here do not see it that way. I do not want to stain the women of the Southern Island. The two of them walked out of the room together. Seeing her carrying another bundle, he asked, What about that blanket? She explained, His Majesty used this to cover me before he left. I must have looked cold then. I was planning to return it on the way back through the servant in charge of such things. The young man, whose mind was not exactly pure, seemed to suspect something again and fell silent in thought, wandering around near the side chambers. After a while, he came to his own conclusion. Even His Majesty has finally found his own happiness. No, it's been a long time since His Majesty was like this. Sazin, walking beside him, had no idea what he was babbling about. She gazed off into the distance, pensive. Thinking about what had happened in the past only made her pity herself. In a soft voice, she said, "His Majesty seems to enjoy making people flustered. I can't tell which side of him is genuine." Colin, however, took that to mean something else entirely, his imagination already soaring. Could it be that he wants to know you better? That was not at all what she meant. Her brows nearly knit together. He's like a hornet's nest, incredibly irritating. He took the opportunity to praise a certain someone, but he's actually quite good to you. Generally speaking, anyway. She looked unconvinced by his words. Is that so? He immediately nodded. Of course. In this empire, I'm the one who understands His Majesty best. After all, I'm his childhood friend. Feel free to ask me anything. Oh, and while we're at it, you can speak comfortably with me too. We still haven't properly introduced ourselves to each other, have we? She hesitated. Then what should I call you? In a not entirely confident tone, he said, I suppose you can call me Sir Colin. With a small smile like spring sunlight, she replied happily, All right, Sir Colin. As he walked, he smugly reflected on how His Majesty would react if he knew the two of them had already become this close. From above the ruined castle came a report. Baron, His Majesty has led troops here. Since ancient times, when the Emperor used catapults or cannons, it meant he intended to personally punish a traitor. Baron Eaton felt fear rise in him. Could it be? He has learned that I sided with the Chancellor, but I only just said I would support him. How has it already come to this? Someone approached and asked for his decision, making him jump. Baron, should we counterattack? 3 years ago, I would have made my decision without hesitation. The fools in the capital only know how to cling to their seats of power, treating him like a coward who fled from the throne. But I know better. His resounding victories, enough to shake both men and monsters alike, are not simply the result of luck. Regardless of the concern that the Emperor, with no heir, might die on the battlefield, it is only when he leaves the palace that his true ability shines. The ragtag soldiers who originally stood with him, only a handful of whom were truly loyal, had gathered strength and numbers through battle and formed an elite force that could not be taken lightly. And now he was leading that army here. The Baron questioned himself. He is still the Emperor, after all. How can I openly resist him? When the other man saw that he said nothing, he called again, Baron, but the Baron did not hear him, still buried in his thoughts. Calm down. That cannon shot was a warning. That means he did not come here to destroy House Eaton's territory. If I resist, I will only give him reason to finish the job. After all the turmoil, he lifted his head and decided. Open the gates. He looked up at the man, standing so loftily above him, and bowed with deep respect. Greetings, Your Majesty, son of the Empire. Julian looked at him. Baron Eaton. The Baron dropped to his knees in submission. Please command me as you will. Your Majes. Suddenly a loud cry rang out. Father! Janice, locked inside a cage, with a potato in her hand and tears and snot all over her face, wailed, Father, please save me. The Baron panicked at once. Janice, my child. Baron Eaton tremblingly addressed the Emperor. Your Majesty, why is my daughter in that filthy cage? What is this? Julian answered calmly. She is eating her last meal. With a deeply concerned expression for his own person, he explained, Lady Eaton dared to harm my lover. The Baron stared in shock. What? Julian continued coolly. She cannot even lift her head properly. She also lost 5 teeth and keeps spitting blood. Do you have any idea what a nuisance this is? In addition, according to royal law, Lady Eaton must be punished. Janice still tried to argue. No, it was only a slap. Hearing that, the Baron came to his own conclusion. So the girl really did strike His Majesty's lover. It was her fault, certainly. A maidservant's life should not have been such a great matter. My innocent, pitiful Janice must have fallen into the trap of some viper in the palace. He looked sorrowfully at his daughter, who was soaking her potato in tears. His mind was in chaos. This is bad. According to royal law, she could be hanged. Why am I hearing about this only now, from the Emperor's own mouth? My daughter is being kept like an animal, waiting for execution. The Emperor brought his army with him, and I opened the gates for him. Now the only thing I can do is kneel and beg mercy from an emperor famous for handing down terrible punishments. If I had known about this earlier, I would have had time to prepare my response. Janice's maid got into trouble. The Emperor's army appeared. Chancellor Elbert must certainly know about this. Fury rose in his heart, and yet he did not send me a single warning. After taking so much from me, has he simply cast me aside like this? Am I being thrown away like a pile of garbage? He fell silent. Then suddenly he dropped to his knees and pleaded, Your Majesty, please show mercy to me and my daughter." She was released and rushed over. "Father." Choking up, he called her name as well. "Janice." Father and daughter embraced each other tightly. Then, trembling, he looked up at the man above him. "Your Majesty." Without even looking at him, Julian said blandly, "I hear she is the heir of House Eaton, a daughter you only had after you were already past 40. You pampered her so much that she became a complete fool." Then he glared downward and spoke sharply, "I am very generous, but I cannot overlook this." Those words left the Baron speechless. "Baron Eaton, what will you do now?" Janice, who had by now become much more obedient, lowered her head and called out, "Lady Sazin." And she bent deeply at the waist in sincerity. "I was truly in the wrong. Please be magnanimous and forgive my family." Sazin tilted her head. "Lady Sazin, earlier you were calling me a whore." Janice spoke remorsefully. "I only wanted to curry favor with the future Empress, so I failed to see how wrong I was. I only knew of the palace through rumors, so I did not know what things were really like. Please forgive my rude behavior." Watching her, Sazin could not help drifting into thought. So His Majesty really did go to meet Baron Eaton. I heard they dragged her away like a beast. They must have made House Eaton pay a price. How generous there depends on His Majesty's plans. To be honest, execution over a single slap would be a little too much. Still, seeing a noble bow her head is rather satisfying. She let out a soft breath and answered gently, "All right, I understand." Janice hurriedly asked, "Then you forgive me?" Expressionless, Sazin nodded. Something like that. Tears of joy sprang into Janice's eyes. "Thank heavens. Thank you so much." Her whole body seemed ready to burst into bloom. "Father, no, I shouldn't call him that in public. My father has already sworn loyalty to His Majesty." Seeing her like that, Sazin could not help thinking, "She's rather cute, actually." Then Janice continued, surprising her, "But His Majesty ordered me to beg Lady Sazin for forgiveness as well." That was when I realized how much His Majesty cherishes Lady Sazin. Though favored, Sazin was still plagued by wandering thoughts. It may not really be necessary to think about it, but does His Majesty truly care about me? I feel foolish for trying to hide the truth. Overcome by excitement and curiosity, Janice could not keep her mouth shut and asked, "And now I'm very curious about the love story between the two of you." Sazin froze and looked at the girl in confusion. "Isn't it because you only wore the clothes of your homeland? Did that happen because of Lady Stuart?" Then, as if remembering something, Janice lowered her voice. "Lady Sazin, I sincerely want to warn you." Sazin looked surprised. "Warn me about what?" Janice stepped closer and spoke softly. "I don't know whether this will help you, but..." She leaned close to Sazin's ear and whispered, "Be careful of the butterfly." After Janice begged forgiveness and left, the Emperor returned not long afterward. "I'm very glad that Your Majesty returned safely," she said. Seeing what she was wearing, he could not help asking, "You are wearing palace clothes. Is there a reason?" She lowered her eyes to examine her clothes and thought quietly. The Southern Island clothes were also part of His Majesty's plan. I needed to prove to Dina Stewart that I was her rival, but hiding my identity failed. A thought suddenly appeared in Sazin's mind. "Should I put them back on?" Embarrassed, she answered him, "Those clothes are too revealing, and they seem to make everyone uncomfortable." Julian spoke gently, as if concerned for the woman before him. "And do they make you uncomfortable as well?" She lowered her head, a little downcast, and replied, "Yes, they do." His sharp-featured face turned toward her as he said indulgently, "Then just wear whatever makes you comfortable." She had not expected him to agree so easily, and it left her stunned. "Why, yes, thank you, Your Majesty." She suddenly remembered what she needed to do. "I'll prepare some tea for you. Ever since you went out, you still haven't had anything to drink." He had been about to say more, but seeing her like that, he reluctantly agreed. "All right." Her mind was still in turmoil. What a surprise. I never thought he would give permission so easily. Little did she know, the Emperor's face had darkened. Looking at her retreating figure, someone sank into thought. He even added one more condition, that I must beg forgiveness from Miss Sazin. He treats her better than I thought. Meanwhile, she was in such a good mood that she went off to do her work. After speaking with Siren, the Emperor also returned to his study. He focused intently on the pile of documents on his desk. The charm of a man at work, truly breathtakingly handsome. Suddenly, the study door opened. The interruption made him stop and look up. The two people who had entered stepped forward and said in low voices, "Forgive us, Your Majesty." He was extremely irritated. He raised his hand and unleashed a burst of power at them, making them stagger. Who dares barge in without permission? He could not clearly see their faces, only hear the man asking, "Your Majesty, are you all right? Shall we help you?" From a voice, he recognized them as Catherine and Colin. Catherine held up a lovely pastry. "You've done very well. This cake is your reward. Since your Majesty is still young, you still like wild strawberry cake, don't you?" she asked warmly. "I heard that even on the battlefield, you wanted to eat the cakes I made." He calmed down a little. "Ah, yes, that's right." Colin also lightly touched his hand. "Please hurry and eat some." His expression finally softened again. "Thank you, Catherine." His mood had only just improved a little, yet in his eyes, those two were now smiling at him with sinister expressions. Even so, he still tried to scoop up a bite of cake and bring it to his mouth. Outside the door, a loud shout suddenly rang out. "Sir Colin, hurry. There must be poison in the air where His Majesty is." "What? Where did the guard stationed here go?" Siren, Colin, and the butler all pushed the door open and shouted, "Your Majesty." Seeing the scene before them, they could not help but wonder, who are these people? By then, the other two had already collapsed to the ground. Housekeeper Catherine stepped forward to inspect them. "They're just laboring servants. They disguised themselves as us." Colin stared blankly. "Disguised? Then what just happened?" "Your Majesty, what happened?" Siren, standing beside him, was also terribly worried. "Are you all right? Did you eat anything?" Julian, who had been trying to stay calm this whole time, finally spat out a mouthful of syrup. Then he collapsed heavily to the floor before everyone's eyes, throwing the whole group into panic. "Your Majesty!" They quickly helped him lie down and rest, but his body was still racked with pain. Seeing how pale he remained, the people around him could not help but worry. He already vomited everything out, so why isn't his condition improving? Another person replied, sadly, "He already digested too much of it. It has spread throughout his body." "The blackberries on that cake. I've seen them before on Susan Island. They're wild berries, but in truth, they're poisonous fruit that come from a strange kind of tree." Siren looked at the two of them. "If we don't neutralize the poison, it will take effect. Then we need to summon the royal physician." Catherine was extremely cautious. There isn't a single trustworthy person. If even the guards can pull tricks like this, then how can we? Because she was so anxious, she spoke hastily. "I know a plant that can cure the poison. They can't possibly control every single herb and plant in the garden. I'll go pick it myself." It took an hour to reach the Imperial Herb Garden, and the person they met there was a young woman. She asked, "Fennel?" Siren hurriedly replied, "Yes. It's a plant with many yellow flowers growing from the same root." The woman understood immediately, but answered, "I know what it is, but there isn't any in the garden." She pointed toward a distant mountain. "Everything that was harvested has already been sent to the palace. What remains grows wild on that mountain." Hearing that, Siren became utterly distressed. Why did it have to be now? In the end, Colin and she had no choice but to go into that forest themselves. Siren let out a long, sorrowful sigh. "I was too careless. I never thought they would use people to carry black magic. Has Chancellor Elbert already decided to assassinate His Majesty?" Colin turned to look at her. "No, that can't be. He still hasn't secured Miss Stager's marriage to His Majesty. He was certain of it. He must have another plan. He's a powerful sorcerer. He could pretend to be benevolent and then save His Majesty's life." Hearing that, she seemed to realize something. She stared at him in confusion. "The Chancellor is a sorcerer? I thought he had sorcerers under his command." Colin let out a heavy sigh. "We think he does it himself, but anyone who uses dark sorcery is punished by death. Even if he's a noble, can't we charge him?" He raised two fingers and explained, "We lack two things: evidence and political power. Even if we found evidence, his servants would be executed while he himself would remain untouched." While governing in place of the young emperor, he formed alliances with many young nobles both inside and outside the palace. Instead, His Majesty would be the one placed in danger. That's why the last meeting was so important. The war preserved the army's strength and secured the support of the people. But we still need to persuade the nobles on the emperor's side. Walking behind him, Siren listened seriously to his words. Colin clenched his fist. "It will take much longer to bring down the Chancellor. even after something like this. Siren looked at Colin's calm attitude with pity. He isn't even angry. Has he already grown too used to this? He had to endure these things since he was a child. Just thinking about it was enough to drive her mad. Then he suddenly turned around to look at her. We've climbed quite high already, but I still haven't seen anything. She offered a suggestion for finding it faster. Let's split up and search. I'll look over here. Colin spoke up with a warning. All right, if anything happens, call for me. They searched the mountain until the sun stood high overhead. Perhaps because it had all been harvested recently, they could not find any fennel. Meanwhile, the poison was already spreading throughout His Majesty's body. If they delayed any longer, his internal organs would begin to fail. As Colin searched carefully through the plants, he prayed under his breath, "Please, appear already." On Siren's side, she also kept searching without pause. Every second mattered. I want to stand by and watch this happen again. As if she had spotted something, her eyes lit up. It was a small plant, blooming with shimmering flowers. She shouted loudly, I found it, Sir Colin." Hearing her, he was overjoyed. "Really? I'm coming right away." She focused intently on digging up the plant, careful not to damage its roots. Because she was so concentrated, she had no idea danger was creeping near. It was a pitch-black snake with blood-red eyes. It lunged at her, startling her so badly that she let out a piercing scream. Colin came rushing over in alarm. "Siren, what is it?" Frightened, she fell back onto the ground. "This snake came close to me." Colin could not see any snake and looked baffled. "There's snakes in the mountains? Where?" She calmed down. "It's fine. It isn't venomous." Then, unexpectedly, when he thought she was terrified, she grabbed the snake tightly by the neck and held it up. Colin was utterly shocked. "Why are you picking it up? Put it down. I'll kill it." Siren turned to look at him. "Huh? This isn't the time to make grilled snake. Are you hungry?" Colin was so exasperated he almost exploded. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Siren promptly tossed the snake into the bushes and shooed it away. "Go on. I'm busy, so I'm letting you off." Colin still cannot process it. "Why you? Did you eat snakes back in your hometown?" She answered indifferently, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Yeah, there are lots of them in the mountains." She enthusiastically hugged the plant and ran off. "We found the fennel, so let's hurry back." Colin was still hugging himself in horror. "Wait, do you really eat snakes?" She even started describing it to him. "You've never tried it? You skin it and roast it over a fire." At that moment, a sharp pain shot through her leg as she walked.